Hello and welcome, my fellow nocturnal historians. Tonight, you'll be taking a quiet little journey. Not into the world of samurai glory, cherry blossoms, or elegant tea ceremonies. No, not that version of Japan. Instead, you'll be waking up in a cold wooden farmhouse on the edge of a rice paddy in feudal Japan. You're not a warrior, not a poet, not even a ronin. You're just someone with a backache, a weak bowl of barley, and a permanent craving for food that doesn't suck. This is the quiet, brutal life of a countryside peasant in the Edo period. And before we begin, go ahead and dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. If you enjoy these slow, strange bedtime journeys through history, feel free to subscribe and leave a comment. Let me know what time it is where you're listening and whether your pillow is softer than a straw mat left out in the rain. Now, take a breath. Settle in. Because the rice is thin, the fire is dying, and the rooster hasn't even bothered to crow yet. Let's begin. You wake up cold. Not cool breeze cold. Not chilly morning cold. But deep, penetrating, bone-splitting cold. The kind of cold that doesn't feel like it's just in the air. It's inside you, woven into your very ribs. You're lying on a futon that's about as thick as a sheet of old paper. The straw stuffing beneath has long since flattened into something more symbolic than supportive. You feel every plank of the floor beneath you, and they are not friendly. The blanket over you, hemp cloth, heavy with years of sweat, smoke, and winter damp, smells faintly of mold, wood ash, and regret. You pull it tighter, as if that would help. It doesn't. There's a wooden headrest under your neck, which does the dual job of flattening your skull and reminding you you're not a noble. Pillows, after all, are for people with actual rice to eat and time to brush their teeth. You blink. Your breath is visible in the early dark. The paper windows beside you are rimmed with frost. The roof leaks cold through every reed and beam, and you can hear the wind slipping in through the gaps in the walls like an uninvited ghost. You don't want to move, but you also can't feel your toes. Somewhere nearby, someone is snoring. Your little brother curled under the same blanket. On the other side of the room, your grandmother sleeps beneath an old straw mat. There's a soft cluck near your feet. You glance down. Yes, there's a chicken. In the house, again. There is no such thing as privacy, or bedrooms, or separate spaces for people and poultry. The entire family, 3 generations, 2 goats sometimes, and an ongoing flea infestation, shares the same single room, the same fire, and the same smells. You stretch slowly, regretting it immediately as your joints pop like someone stepping on twigs. Your shoulders ache, your knees feel rusted, and your back has made a permanent enemy of horizontal surfaces. You're 16 years old. In peasant years, that's practically middle-aged. You sit up. The floor is cold and wet in places. Not in the fresh morning dew kind of way, but more of a chicken did something last night kind of way. You try to avoid the worst patches as you shuffle to the hearth in the center of the room. The fire's dead. Just ash and the memory of heat. You look around. The room is barely lit by the pale grey of the outside. The family altar sits in the corner, dusty and unattended. A wilted offering of dried daikon lies beside a burnt-out incense stick. Your ancestors are probably hungry too. You step outside. Or rather, you push back the reed mat that functions as a door and let the wind slap you in the face like a rude monk. It's not snowing, which is good. But that just means it rained instead. The ground is thick with mud, and your bare feet sink into it like tofu into hot broth. Except less comforting. You walk to the water barrel. It's half frozen. You break the crust with your sleeve-covered elbow, scoop up a ladleful, and take a drink. It tastes like something filtered through regret and mosquito larvae. Back inside, your mother is already up, squatting beside the hearth and poking at the ashes. Her hair is tied back with a strip of cloth that might have once been white. She doesn't say anything. She just hands you the rice water bowl. It's warm, barely. You sip. It's thin, slightly sour, and mostly just hot water that smells like someone waved rice over it from a distance. This is not breakfast. This is tradition. No one speaks during meals. There's nothing new to say, and no energy to say it. Your older brother eats with his head down. Your grandmother picks at her bowl with fingers stiff from the cold. Your little brother slurps noisily. You finish first because there's not much to finish. The rest of the morning routine is simple. Try not to freeze. Try not to trip over the chicken. Try not to think about how much food sucked yesterday. Try not to think about how it will suck again today. You put on your work robe. It smells like wet rope, and it was last washed sometime before the previous emperor died. You tie it with a strip of old fishing net. Your sandals are gone. The straps broke, and the sole was used to patch a hole in the roof. You'll go barefoot again. Your soles are basically leather now. You grab the lunch bundle your mother hands you, carefully wrapped in cloth. It's probably a rice ball. But don't get excited. It's made of barley and millet, with a pickled plum in the middle so sour it could curse your ancestors. Outside, the village is waking up. Chickens are flapping. A child is crying. Someone is already shouting about the landlord. The neighbors trudge past, heads down, bodies bent, each clutching a hoe or a sickle, or just the silent hope that today won't be worse than yesterday. You follow them towards the fields. The sky remains the same color as the mud. You think about food. You always think about food. You dream of white rice. Not barley, not millet, not rice scraped from the bottom of a burned pot. Real, fluffy, pearly white rice. You've seen it once, at a festival. Someone rich dropped a grain, and you stared at it on the ground like it was a gemstone. You didn't dare pick it up. That would have been embarrassing. You just stared. You still remember it, the way it shimmered, the way it didn't belong to you. And that, you think, is the most feudal Japan thing of all. You make your way to the back of the house where the firewood is kept, or where it's supposed to be kept. The small stack has been reduced to 3 crooked pieces that look like they were once part of a fence, or maybe someone's ancestral shrine. They're damp. Of course they are. Everything is damp. Even your thoughts feel damp. You pick up the wood and bring it to the hearth, where your mother has already begun trying to coax yesterday's ashes into something that might be mistaken for warmth. She's blowing on it gently, like she's trying to breathe life into a corpse. You add the wood. It hisses in protest. The smoke rises quickly, thick and grey, coiling up into the rafters, staining the paper ceiling with fresh despair. You cough. Your brother coughs. Your grandmother waves it away with her sleeve, like that's ever worked. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof. And even that's half blocked by a pot someone hung up to catch rainwater. Rainwater isn't clean, but it's water. Clean water is a myth, like samurai who pay taxes. You look at the pot. There's a bird feather floating in it. You think about removing it. You don't. Your mother adds a small pinch of dried tea leaves to a cracked kettle. The leaves come from a neighbor who knows someone who once swept the steps of a temple. It's not really tea. It's more like leaf water. Bitter, thin, and brown. She pours in water from the barrel, cloudy with silt and whatever drifted in overnight. The fire spits again. You sit by the hearth, waiting. Not because you're in a hurry, but because there's nothing else to do. The warmth comes slowly. First to your fingers, then your knees. You rub your arms, squinting through the smoke, pretending this is a peaceful morning ritual instead of a survival performance. The tea boils. The smell is faint, earthy, smoky, slightly like boiled sandals. Your mother pours a cup, then another, then one for herself. She doesn't smile. She never does in the morning. You lift the cup to your lips. The ceramic is cracked. There's a line of soot along the rim. You sip carefully. It's hot. That's the best part. Then the taste hits. It's bitter, sharp, like something that used to be a plant but gave up. Still, it's warm, and that counts for something. You finish the cup. It doesn't fill you, but it occupies you. Outside, the village is beginning to hum. Not in a musical way. more like a tired groan. You hear buckets sloshing, a cart creaking, chickens screaming about something that probably isn't your fault. You get up and step outside again. Your job this morning is to fetch more water, because even if it's dirty, smoky, bug-infested water, it's all you have, and you'll need it. For washing, for cooking, for boiling more not tea. The well is a short walk from your house, which means it's close enough to reach barefoot, but far enough to make you wish you had sandals. The path is muddy, lined with stones that are either too sharp or too slippery, depending on which foot hits them first. You pass two women hauling buckets balanced on poles across their shoulders. They nod at you. You nod back. No one speaks. Speaking requires energy. Energy requires food. You see the problem. At the well, there's already a line. You recognize the man in front. He smells like pickled fish and poorly repressed rage. He glares at you. Not personally, just generally. When it's your turn, you lower the rope slowly, listening for the splash. It takes longer than you expect. The water level is low again. Winter does that. So does the landlord, who rerouted the stream last year to irrigate his personal rice paddies. Which is strange, considering he doesn't eat rice. He eats sweet fish and seaweed from Edo Bay. You haul the bucket up, arms straining. Your fingers are numb by the time it clears the rim. You pour the water into your own wooden pail, careful not to spill it. Every drop counts, even the ones that taste like ancient frogs. The walk back is slower, heavier. The pail sloshes with each step, and every splash that hits your ankle feels like an insult. The cold soaks into your bones again. When you return, your mother is scraping the bottom of the miso jar. This, is a sacred ritual. The jar itself is large, ceramic, and chipped. Inside is a dark brown paste, thick and salty, made from fermented soybeans and eternal disappointment. She spoons out the last of it, mixes it with hot water and a single dried leaf, and calls it soup. You sit with your siblings as she ladles it into bowls. The smell is fine. The taste is salt, mostly. Salt and something faintly fungal. You drink it slowly, partly because it burns your tongue, partly because if you finish too quickly, you'll be hungrier than before. The miso leaves a film on your teeth. You lick your lips. Not because it tasted good, but because you're not sure when the next thing you eat will be warm. Your grandmother says something. You don't catch it. Something about how miso used to be thicker, better. You nod. She always says that. You clean your bowl with your finger, then your finger with your tongue. It's not enough. It never is. You're not full, but you're not empty. That's the closest thing to winning around here. Your brother stands up, adjusts his robe, and starts sharpening the hoe. The sound of metal on stone is familiar, comforting even, like the world reminding you that no matter what, there's always something waiting to be dug. Your mother bundles the miso jar in cloth and sets it aside. Maybe she'll bury it later, let it ferment deeper, see if the gods of flavor will visit in the spring. You don't believe in flavor anymore. Just heat, salt, texture. Outside, someone is shouting. You recognize the voice. It's the village headman yelling at a dog again. Or maybe at a child who looks like a dog. Hard to tell from here. You pour the rest of the water into the side barrel, tuck the pail under the eaves, and gather your things. The tools are dull. The rope is fraying. The rice ball in your sleeve is already warm from your body heat, which makes it feel squishier than it should. The sun is climbing slowly, reluctantly, and you, like it, have no choice but to rise. You reach into your sleeve and touch the cloth-wrapped lump nestled against your ribs. It's warm now, too warm, soft, almost damp. You know what it is. Your lunch, your precious midday prize, your sad, dense barley ball. It's not rice. Of course it isn't. Rice is for merchants, for samurai, for those who count coins instead of calories. You're a peasant. You count seasons. You count blisters. You count the number of times you chewed without swallowing anything. But still, it's called a rice ball. That's the joke. You remember a time when you were 6, when you saw actual white rice for the first time? A wedding. The landlord's second cousin married someone with teeth. You stood in the back with your hands behind your back, watching the servants carry trays of steaming white heaven. The smell alone made your knees weak. They dropped a grain. Just one. It landed near your feet, perfect and whole, like a tiny moon. You didn't touch it, you just stared. Your brother tried to stomp on it. You nearly fought him. He laughed. He said, "Don't worry, you'll taste rice when you're rich or dead." You're not dead. Not yet. But you're still waiting. Barley is not rice. Millet is not rice. Buckwheat, wheat, sorghum, foxtail, and whatever weed your grandmother insists is ancient mountain grain, is not rice. But you eat it anyway. You mash it. You steam it. You soak it overnight in wooden tubs and pray to the gods of fermentation. Your mother says it builds strength. Your father used to say it builds humility. Your stomach says it builds gas. The midday bell rings. Not a bell exactly. More like an old pot being hit with a stick by a tired boy with a runny nose. But the message is clear. Stop digging. Start chewing. You sit under a tree, back hunched, fingers aching. The sun is out now, and it doesn't care that you're too tired to enjoy it. You unwrap your lunch, the barley bowl stares back at you. Brownish grey. Slightly cracked. It smells faintly of smoke and someone else's laundry. You take a bite. It crumbles in your mouth like old paper. The pickled plum in the center hits you like a slap. Sharp, sour, and oddly invigorating. You chew slowly, trying not to look at your neighbor's lunch, which looks somehow larger. You wonder if he added beans, maybe even a sliver of sweet potato. You wonder if you could trade your lunch for his. You won't, but you wonder. White rice exists in this world the way stars exist in the sky. Visible, distant, untouchable. When the Lord holds a festival, the smell wafts through the entire village. Pots the size of bathtubs steam with short-grain jewels. You stand in line for 2 hours to receive a half-scoop, served by someone in robes too clean to be trusted. You bow, you chew slowly, and for a moment, you believe in a better world. Then the rice is gone, and the memory becomes something you cling to in winter, when your breath is visible and your belly isn't. Sometimes when the harvest fails, and it always fails just a little, you eat worse than barley. You eat rice bran, scraped from the sides of someone else's storage bin. You mix it with ash and salt and form it into sad little pucks. You chew sawdust bread made from shredded bark. You eat acorns, but only the right ones. The others will kill you, slowly and dramatically. You learn this because your cousin didn't. Your grandmother tells stories about the old days, when the rice fields were green and full, and the gods walked the earth with clean feet. She says people used to eat rice 3 times a day. She says they used to complain about it being too plain. You've never met anyone like that, but you believe her, because hope is cheaper than food. The rice tax takes everything. The system is simple. The village produces rice, then gives it away. First to the landlord, then to the magistrate, then to the shogun, who uses it to feed the people who don't grow rice. If anything's left, it stays here, which is rare. Rice is currency, rice is power. And you, unfortunately, are just the labor. You carry the sacks, you weigh them, you bow as they're taken. You don't cry, not anymore, because crying uses energy, and you need that energy to pretend barley tastes like rice. You once saw a merchant's wife feed rice to her dog. A real dog, 4 legs, tail, barked at butterflies. You nearly lost your mind, she laughed. Dogs won't eat millet, she said. Too hard to digest. You stared at her, silently chewing millet. Later, you dreamed about switching places with the dog. Not for the rice. For the collar? At night, you eat rice soup. Or at least that's what they call it. It's hot water with a spoonful of leftover barley and a sprinkle of green onion. Sometimes there's a sliver of pickled radish. Sometimes just the memory of it. You sip it slowly, watching the steam rise like a ghost from the bowl. Your brother slurps loudly. You imagine slapping him with a wet reed, but you don't, because that would spill the soup, and you're not that kind of monster. You heard once that in Edo, there are restaurants where you can order rice in wooden boxes, served with eel and sweet soy sauce. You've never seen Edo. You've never seen eel. You think soy sauce might be a myth invented to torment you. Your neighbor claims he tasted it once. He said it was salty and deep. You don't know what deep means. You don't ask, because if it's true, it'll hurt. And if it's not, it'll hurt more. Your mother says rice is sacred. She tells you to never waste a grain, to bow before planting, to bow before eating, to bow after you finish, even if your bowl is still half empty, especially if it is. She says rice contains the spirit of the farmer. You wonder what barley contains. You suspect it's bitterness. Sometimes, during festival days, you pretend. You take your barley ball. You roll it in crushed sesame. You heat it over a fire. You call it grilled rice. You eat it with ceremony, with dignity, like you're tasting something ancient, like you're honoring your ancestors. But mostly, you're trying to remember what it feels like to eat without disappointment. Tonight, you lie awake, your stomach pressing gently against your ribs. Not in pain, not exactly, just aware. You dream of rice again. Not steaming bowls, not banquets, just a handful, enough to chew, enough to swallow, enough to feel for a moment like maybe tomorrow will taste better. You know it won't, but you dream it anyway, because even if the food sucks, the dreaming is still free. For now, you leave the house before the sun is fully up. The sky is the color of thin miso and just as warm, which is to say, not at all. The path to the fields is slick with yesterday's frost and today's anxiety. Your feet, toughened from years of barefoot travel, still flinch at every stone and frozen lump. You carry your hoe slung across your shoulder. It's older than you, cracked along the handle, its metal blade dulled to the texture of an old coin. It has a name, unofficially, the complaint, because that's what it makes with every strike. Your brother walks ahead of you, his pace slow, deliberate. He's chewing something. Probably a piece of last year's bamboo root, not because it tastes good, because it keeps his teeth from grinding from stress. The fields stretch out before you, brown, barren, reluctant. The paddies are dry now, waiting for spring planting. But the work doesn't wait. There are ditches to clear, rocks to remove, bundles of weeds to gather and burn. You reach your plot. It's technically the family's plot, but mostly it's yours now. Since your father passed, the hoe has found a new best friend in your spine. You begin with clearing. That means squatting, pulling at tangled roots, and swearing quietly so your ancestors don't hear. The mud clings to your fingers like guilt. Cold seeps up through your legs like shame. You work silently. Everyone does. The fields are full, yet no one speaks. Grunts, coughs, the occasional sneeze, but no words. Words are wasted calories. By mid-morning, your back is stiff, your hands are scratched, and your stomach has started a quiet rebellion. Not loud, just insistent. It reminds you of what you ate this morning, and what you didn't. You reach into your sleeve and unwrap the barley ball. It's warm from your body heat, and somehow soggy. The pickled plum inside has begun to dissolve into a pinkish blotch. It looks sad. You bite into it anyway. The grain crumbles, then sticks to your molars like a debt. The sour plum hits your tongue and makes you wince. You chew slowly. You chew because chewing makes it last longer. You chew because if you swallow too fast, it's gone. You finish in 3 bites. You stare at your empty fingers. You lick the salt from your skin. You almost eat the cloth, almost. You tuck it away and stand back up. The sun is rising now, burning through the mist, revealing every crack in the land and every ache in your joints. You go back to work. Your hoe hits something hard. Rock, of course. You bend to dig it out. It's bigger than expected. Your brother helps. Together, you wrestle it from the soil like a cursed relic. You roll it to the side and sit on it, gasping. You remember a story. Someone once found a piece of buried pottery in their field. Took it to the village head. It turned out to be ancient, valuable. It was taken to Edo. The finder received a gift, a small bowl of white rice. You wonder if that was worth it. You decide yes, definitely. The midday rest is short. No one brings shade. There are no trees in the middle of the field, just stumps and regret. You drink from a shared water gourd. The water is warm now, tasting faintly of bamboo and old cloth. A neighbor collapses nearby, his face pale, his hands trembling. He's older, maybe 30. You help him sit up. Someone brings him a ball of rice, real rice. You stare. He doesn't eat it, just holds it. You stare harder. Eventually he does eat it. You try not to cry. You fail a little, but you hide it. Because salt water is better spent in soup. The afternoon sun presses down like a punishment. Your robe sticks to your back. Your knees squish with each step. You smell like earth and regret. The hoe slips from your hand. You pick it up. It slips again. You spit into your palm and grip harder. You swing. You dig. You breathe like a dying bellows. You are 13% sweat, 80% hunger, and the rest is just dust. Your neighbor mutters something. You can't hear. Or maybe you just don't care. A crow lands on a nearby fence post. It stares at you. You stare back. It caws? You caw back. It wins. By late afternoon, your arms feel like boiled noodles. Your legs wobble. You've eaten 300 calories. You've burned 3,000. The field looks no different than this morning. Maybe a few fewer rocks. Maybe a little more mud on your legs. You hope that counts for something. You know it doesn't. You gather your tools and begin the walk home. It's uphill. Of course it is. Everything is uphill. You pass children kicking a ball made of straw and hope. They laugh. You try to remember what that feels like. You step in something that smells like goat. You don't look down. There's no point. Back home, your mother is preparing dinner. You smell steam, not food, just steam. You sit by the fire, legs trembling. Your grandmother is already asleep. Or unconscious. It's hard to tell. The pot bubbles. Your mother stirs slowly. You don't ask what it is. You don't want to know. You just hope it's warm and chewable. And doesn't remind you of anything else you've eaten this week. You lay your hoe down by the door. It leans awkwardly, like you. You look at your hands. Blistered, cracked, not from battle, from barley. You used to dream of fighting in the army, becoming a soldier, a samurai. Now you just dream of chewing. Dinner is served. It's soup again. You're not disappointed. You didn't expect anything else. It's hot, it's salty, it burns your mouth. It makes your eyes water. You finish every drop. You thank your mother. She nods without smiling. That's how you know she's tired too. Later you lie down. Same mat, same spot, same chicken. Your stomach growls softly like a distant drum. Your brother mutters in his sleep. Something about rice. You stare at the ceiling. You count the gaps in the roof. You close your eyes. You think, today the food sucked. Tomorrow it will too. But at least the hoe didn't break. Yet. Dinner smells like salvation. Which in this house usually means miso. Hot, earthy, steaming miso. The kind that clings to the rafters and your memories alike. The pot on the fire is old. Older than you, older than your mother, maybe even older than time itself, judging by the crack that wraps around it like a prophecy. And inside it, the sacred brew. Miso soup. You watch your mother ladle it into bowls with the solemn grace of a monk pouring sacred wine. The steam rises. The smell hits your nose. Salt, fermented soybean, a hint of smoke, a whisper of seaweed if you squint with your nose. You take your bowl and sit cross-legged on the floor, watching the surface ripple. There's no tofu, that's for the festivals. No green onions, no mushrooms, no fancy add-ins. Just broth and flecks of miso paste clinging to the edges like ghosts who forgot how to season. You sip and it hits you. It's awful. It's warm. Yes, salty. Definitely. But it tastes like someone dissolved old sandals into hot water and stirred in a spoonful of regret. It's thin, watery, sharp. There's a bitterness underneath that reminds you of things you don't want to remember. Like burnt barley or your uncle's herbal medicine that made you hallucinate a talking cow. But you drink it. Because it's hot. Because it's food. Because it's miso. Or at least, it's supposed to be. You glance at your brother. He's slurping without hesitation. He has no taste buds left, probably. Years of salt and scalding heat have erased them. He could drink river mud and complement the umami. Your grandmother is already finished. She's licking the inside of her bowl with the efficiency of a cat. She has no teeth, but miso requires none. It's a soup for the weary, the toothless, and the perpetually underfed. You remember when you were younger, and miso felt magical? Your mother told you it was healing, that it made your bones strong, your spirit calm, your ancestors smile. Now it just makes your throat hurt. And still you love it, because you have to. Miso is one of the oldest things in your life. It has seen more winters than your entire bloodline. It's fermented in clay barrels behind your house, where it sits for weeks, months, or however long your family can ignore it, before cracking the seal and hoping for the best. Some batches are darker than others. The darkest ones are usually the oldest, and according to your grandmother, the strongest. Strongest here meaning most likely to taste like wet charcoal stirred with a broken stick. You've seen miso that looked like tar. You've seen miso that sparkled, and you're not sure if that was salt crystals or insect wings. Once, you opened a barrel and it hissed at you. You closed it again. Respectfully. Miso isn't food. It's tradition. It's history. It's punishment disguised as nourishment. You once traded a piece of fabric for a handful of merchant miso, the kind from Edo. Smooth, pale, delicate. A miso that whispered instead of screamed. You carried it home like treasure. Cooked it with the softest water you could steal. Heated it gently over a low flame. And then you tasted it. And you wept, not because it was good, but because it was so much better than anything you'd ever known that it made every miso you'd eaten before taste like betrayal. You'd tell no one about that miso. It's your secret, a memory to chew on when the bowl is empty. Tonight's miso is thinner than usual, stretched with extra water. Maybe someone else joined for dinner. Maybe your mother's worried about tomorrow. Maybe the miso barrel didn't offer much. You don't ask. You just finish your bowl. Then you drink the dregs. Then you wipe the bowl with your sleeve. Then you chew the sleeve. Almost. You lie back on the floor, belly not full but not empty. It's a delicate balance, a familiar one. Miso doesn't fill you. It just reminds you that hunger exists in layers. You close your eyes. The room smells like smoke and salt. Your brother farts softly. You ignore it. Tomorrow there will be more miso, and it will taste the same, or worse, and you'll still drink it, because you're not really drinking miso. You're drinking survival. You're drinking the echo of 1,000 peasants who did the same before you. And if you're lucky, someday, someone will remember you every time they taste something slightly too salty and deeply disappointing. You fall asleep thinking about miso, and how food shouldn't hurt your feelings, and how somehow it always does. The sun is cruel, not in a poetic way, not in a kissed by sunlight or bathed in gold kind of way. No, this sun has teeth. It bites. It doesn't warm you. It tests you. It presses down from above like it wants to turn your skull into rice crackers. You're back in the field. Dirt clings to your legs. Sweat pools in places you can't politely mention. Your robe sticks to your back like wet parchment. Every breath tastes like dust and old ash. The work hasn't changed. Still digging, still bending, still pulling weeds with roots that seem personally offended by your existence. But the heat has changed. It's heavier now, thicker, like the air is soup, and you're the miso. You glance around. Everyone else is wilting too. Your brother has taken off the top layer of his robe and tied it around his forehead. Your neighbor is crouched in the shade of a cart, fanning himself with a broken sandal. Someone nearby is singing, a low, tuneless hum that sounds more like begging than music. Your stomach speaks, not loudly, just enough to remind you that this body still requires food, even if none is currently present. You wipe your forehead and check the sun's position. It's high, blinding, the halfway mark. Time for lunch. You find a patch of shade beneath a tree that looks like it gave up on life 2 summers ago. Its branches are skeletal, its leaves more memory than matter. but it casts a shadow. And in this moment, that's enough. You sit down slowly. Your knees crack. Your hips sigh. You feel like a sliding door with a bad hinge. From your sleeve, you pull out the cloth bundle. You open it carefully, almost reverently. Inside, your lunch. A ball of barley and millet, pressed together like a child's first attempt at pottery. A pickled plum sits embedded in the center, shriveled, dark red, threatening. A single strip of daikon, the color of surrender. You stare at it. You don't smile, but something inside you nods. This is what lunch looks like. This is what survival looks like. You take the first bite. It's cold. Not refreshing cold. Not cool rice on a summer day cold. No. This was wrapped at dawn and marinated in underarm sweat cold. The grains crumble, dry and rough, but your saliva works hard. It always does. You chew slowly. It tastes like nothing. Then the plum hits. Sour, sharp, unapologetic. You wince, you chew, you swallow, you don't die. Success. A fly lands on your lunch. You flick it away. It returns. It brings friends. Soon you're guarding your food like a feudal lord protects his concubines. You eat faster. A bee buzzes nearby. You hiss at it. It ignores you. You chew harder. Your brother sits beside you. His lunch looks the same. It always does. You don't talk. Talking wastes energy. He finishes before you. He burps. You consider smacking him. But that, too, wastes energy. So instead, you eat the daikon. It's limp, bitter, salty. Like you. You drink from your water gourd. The water is hot now, baked by the sun. It tastes faintly of wood and cloth and something metallic you try not to think about. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve. It leaves more dirt than it removes. Your shirt sticks to your back. You peel it away. It slaps back into place. You sigh, and then you get up. Because lunch is over. There is no nap. There is no rest. You go back to digging. Back to pulling. Back to moving rocks from one place to another. Because apparently, that's how peasants fight entropy. The sun keeps rising somehow. You feel it in your skull. Your eyes burn, your mouth dries. Your stomach doesn't complain. It knows better. It knows there's nothing else coming. Once, when you were younger, you read about siestas in faraway lands, places where people actually rest during the hottest part of the day. You laughed. Then you cried. Now, you just work, because that's what you do. That's what everyone does. A child passes by holding a stick. He pokes at frogs in the ditch. His ribs show through his skin. He's not working yet. But he will be soon. You wonder if he knows. You wonder if anyone ever told him. You hope not. Let him believe that lunch is a gift, not a chore. Let him think the plum is sweet. Let him pretend the flies won't always win. You wipe your face again. The sweat is salty. Salt is expensive. You lick your lip. Maybe that counts. By the time the sun starts falling, your limbs feel hollow. Not light, just empty. Like the tools you carry have stolen something from you. You gather your things, your hoe, your gourd, your cloth, your hunger, and you begin the walk home. It's quiet. Everyone is thinking about dinner, which is brave, because dinner rarely thinks about them. You return home just before the light disappears. Not that you were watching the sun with poetic reverence. You just know the work ends when shadows get long enough to step in. The walk back is slow. Not because your legs are tired, though they are, but because your stomach is empty, and empty things move carefully. Your house looks the same as it did this morning. Same thatched roof, same warped wooden frame, same curtain of smoke leaking from the side, like it's sighing before you can. You duck through the entrance, and the air inside greets you like a damp old blanket, warmish, sour, and too familiar. The fire has been stoked, barely. Your mother sits by the pot, stirring with the slow rhythm of someone who knows exactly how disappointing the contents are. The scent is faint, salty, a little sour, a little burned, mostly water. You drop your hoe by the door and sit near the fire. The warmth stings at first. Your fingers have gone so numb they protest the return of circulation. You flex your toes, rub your hands together, and pretend not to listen to your stomach complain. Your brother arrives behind you, drops a bundle of sticks beside the hearth, and sighs like he invented exhaustion. Your grandmother mumbles something about the weather, or war, or both. She talks to no one in particular, and everyone listens anyway. You wait, because this is dinner. The meal is served in silence. Your bowl is wooden, cracked near the rim, worn soft at the bottom from years of scraping. Inside is a square of rice cake, hard, pale, dense as stone. It was made 3 days ago, maybe 4. Reheated by steam, softened just enough to make biting optional. Beside it lies a piece of pickled radish. It's shriveled, yellowed, and still somehow too strong. You chew it anyway. There's soup, too. Not the good kind. Just hot water with miso residue, a leaf, and maybe a bean if you're lucky. You sip it slowly, as if drawing flavor through imagination. You chew the rice cake. It resists. You chew harder. It softens slightly. You keep chewing. There's no meat. There's rarely meat. And when there is, it's suspicious. You once found a fishbone in your soup. You celebrated. Then you looked closer. It was a twig. You drank it anyway. Your brother finishes first. He always eats fast, like the food might escape. You watch him lick his fingers. You wonder if they tasted better than the radish. Your mother doesn't speak. She never speaks during meals. Not out of respect, but because it takes effort. And effort doesn't belong at dinner. You finish your soup. You scrape the bowl. You lick the spoon. You pretend to be full. You pretend so hard your stomach almost believes you. Almost. There's no dessert. Of course not. Dessert is a myth, something whispered about in merchant towns and temple scrolls. You once heard of something called sweet bean paste. You laughed. Then you cried. The closest you've come to dessert is overcooked pumpkin. And that was 3 harvests ago. You still think about it. The texture. The taste. The way it made you believe, just for a moment, that life was more than survival. You shake the memory. That kind of thinking leads nowhere. After dinner, your family sits around the hearth. No one talks much. Your grandmother tells a story about a fox spirit who stole rice from rich farmers. Everyone nods, as if hoping the fox might visit your village next. Your little brother plays with a piece of string. He wraps it around his fingers, trying to make shapes. He calls it fish. You don't correct him. You stare into the fire. The flames are small. The logs are few. You wonder if the fire feels tired, too. The house creaks. The wind whistles through the cracks. Outside, frogs begin their nightly concert. Inside, someone farts. No one reacts. This is home. Before bed, you drink a cup of hot water. No tea, just water. Heated in the same pot as the soup, carrying the faintest trace of salt and something vaguely plant-based. You sip it slowly. It warms your throat. Not enough to matter, but enough to notice. You lay down on your mat. Same place, same stiffness, same smell. You cover yourself with the blanket. It doesn't cover everything. It never does. You curl up, knees to chest, trying to keep warmth where it belongs. Your stomach gurgles once, then quiets. Not because it's satisfied, but because it knows better. You close your eyes, and for a moment you think about dinner. Not what you ate, but what you didn't. And you wonder if somewhere someone's having seconds, and if their rice cake is soft. Dinner is not just a meal. It's a gamble, a slow, steaming game of edible roulette, where the prize is survival, and the penalty is, well, you try not to think about that. Too much. You stare into your bowl. Tonight, it's soup again. Always soup. But there's something new floating in it. A mushroom. You tilt your head. It's pale, slightly spongy, unfamiliar. You prod it with your chopstick. It wobbles. It smells faintly like moss and fear. You glance at your mother. She's not looking at you. She's watching the fire, face blank, expression unreadable. The look of someone who's made peace with chance. You glance at your grandmother. She's already eaten hers. She's not convulsing. That's a good sign. Probably. You take a small bite. It's chewy, earthy, a little bitter. You chew slowly, you swallow. You wait. Nothing. You take another bite. Still alive. You finish the bowl. Victory! The thing is, you don't really know which mushrooms are safe. No one does. Your uncle used to say, if the birds won't eat it, neither should you. But birds also eat rocks and their own vomit, so that's not especially helpful. Instead, you go by color, shape, and family wisdom passed down through generations of people who either got lucky or didn't. You remember the time 2 neighbors boiled a batch of fresh mushrooms they found after a rainstorm. Looked fine, smelled fine, tasted strong. They spent the next day hallucinating that the village well was haunted by a ghost that only spoke in rice measurements. One of them never really recovered. He now talks to trees. The trees do not answer. And it's not just mushrooms. There's the dried fish. Always suspect. Hung above the fire for weeks, it looks like it's already been eaten once. The skin is leathery, the bones sharp, the smell persistent. You once bit into a piece and hit something hard. You thought it was a scale. It was a pebble. How did a pebble get into the fish? No one knows. You chewed it anyway. Sometimes there are tiny white threads in the flesh. Parasites, maybe. Maybe not. You pretend they're seasoning. Then there's the fermented stuff. Pickles, pastes, and reclaimed vegetables, as your mother calls them. Turnips that started to rot, but then fermented into something sour enough to be considered food again. You eat them because they're strong in flavor and stronger in smell. And when your meal tastes like punishment, your brain believes it must be important. You once ate something that turned your tongue black. Your mother said it was seaweed, aged properly. You're still not sure. You still taste it sometimes in your sleep. There was also that time you found a beetle in your rice cake. Crunchy. Unexpected. But you didn't stop eating. You just didn't chew that side of your mouth for a while. Dinner isn't about nutrition. It's about not collapsing. You eat to stand. You eat to carry. You eat to walk to the fields without falling over. You don't eat for pleasure. You don't eat for taste. You eat because your body demands it. And the only other option is listening to your stomach narrate its own tragedy for the rest of the night. Your little brother once asked what it's like to be full. The whole room went quiet. Even the fire stopped crackling, out of respect. No one answered, because no one remembers. You used to dream of food, real food, bowls of steaming white rice, grilled fish glazed with sweet sauce, soft eggs, golden and runny. Now, you dream of not being poisoned? You dream of mushrooms with names, of soup that doesn't bubble suspiciously, of fish that doesn't glow faintly in the dark. You dream of food that isn't a moral decision. Sometimes you wonder how your ancestors figured it all out. Who was the first to say, let's dry this fish until it becomes paper, then rehydrate it in salty water and hope it doesn't smell like regret? Who discovered that burying vegetables for 6 months turns them into something edible and not just a botanical curse? How many people had to die for your grandmother to know which leaf is medicine and which one sends you to visit the gods personally? You owe a lot to the dead. Most of your dinner wisdom was purchased with their digestive systems. Your neighbor once tried to pickle radish in soy sauce and forgot it for a year. When he opened the jar, it hissed. He still ate it. He's still alive. He walks slower now, but he swears it was worth it. You're not convinced. After dinner, you always listen. Not to conversation, there isn't any, but to the sounds your body makes. Gurgles, pops, pressure, heat, signs, omens. Your stomach is like a temple bell. When it rings wrong, you know something sacred has gone missing. Sometimes you curl up and whisper to it, please be reasonable. It rarely is. Your grandmother once said, you don't eat to live. You eat to remember how to survive. You think about that a lot, especially on nights like this, when the soup is questionable, the pickles are aggressive, and the rice cake has a crack that looks suspiciously like mold. You scrape it off. You eat it anyway, because survival isn't noble. It's just practical. You lie down later, your stomach humming. Not in pain. Not exactly, just aware. You think, if I die tonight, at least I won't be hungry. Then you think, that's probably not true. You turn to your side. listening to your brother mutter in his sleep. He says the word eel. You smile bitterly. You've never tasted eel. You wonder if he has. Probably not. Dreams are free and unfair. You close your eyes. You breathe slowly. You think about the mushroom, still alive. For now, you feel the need in the early morning. Not hunger. That came hours ago. No, this is the other thing. The quiet pressure in your gut. The slow, persuasive shift in your belly that says, it's time. You lie still for a moment, eyes closed, blanket pulled up to your chin, pretending the feeling might go away. It doesn't, so you sit up. The mat creaks. Your knees crack. The room is dark, save for the soft orange glow of yesterday's embers still clinging to life in the hearth. No one else stirs. You slip quietly past your brother, past your grandmother, past the chicken. You step out the front, the reed mat swaying in the wind. The cold hits instantly. Not just cold. Tohoku cold. Northern Japan cold. The kind that slides under your robe and shakes hands with your spine. The kind that makes you question every decision that led you here. But the feeling in your stomach insists. You follow the familiar path behind the house. Past the woodpile. Past the rain barrel. Around the edge of the vegetable patch. To the corner, where the toilet isn't, because there is no toilet. What you have is a hole, a pit dug into the ground, surrounded by wooden planks, covered by a leaning roof that might once have been straight, with 3 sides made of mismatched boards, and one side, always the windward side, left completely open. No door, no lock, no privacy. Just air, and not friendly air. You glance around, no one's watching, probably. You duck inside. You squat. The wood underfoot creaks but holds. You've heard stories, people falling in. You try not to think about that. You finish quickly, not because you're efficient, but because the cold won't let you linger. Your legs go numb halfway through. Your nose runs. Your teeth chatter. There's no paper. There was never paper. Paper is for letters, for priests, for people whose hygiene doesn't rely on leaves, straw, or, on bold days, snow. Today is not bold. Today is straw. You make do. You don't look down. You never look down. That's the rule. You step out. You exhale. You shiver. And you don't feel cleaner, just emptier. You return to the house. No one asks where you went. No one ever does. Because everyone already knows. Later, after breakfast, or what passes for it, your little brother makes the same journey. You hear him muttering to himself as he walks. You hear the squawk of the cold when he opens his robe. He comes back pink-faced and slightly ashamed. No one says a word. When it rains, everything gets worse. The path becomes slippery. The hole fills with water. The straw disintegrates. One time, last autumn, the pit overflowed. No one spoke of it. No one had to. The smell told the whole story. Sometimes you envy the rich, not for their food or their clothes or their houses, but for their toilets. You've heard stories of wooden seats, of polished lacquer, of screens and incense and attendants who warm the chamber in advance. You try to imagine what it would feel like to sit, to lean, to breathe through your nose. You fail, because you've never known comfort in that context. To you, relieving yourself is not a private act. It's a negotiation. With the weather, with your bowels, with the gods. You whisper small prayers each time, not because you're devout, but because the alternative is frostbite in an unspeakable location. Your grandmother says things used to be worse. You don't believe her. You think she just enjoys watching you suffer in familiar ways. The pit gets cleaned twice a year, if you're lucky. There's a rotation, a chart, a stick with a notch carved in it. When your name comes up, you don't argue. You take the scoop, the bucket, and your dignity. You return with just the bucket. Sometimes, in the dead of winter, the contents of the pit freeze solid. You celebrate. It's the only time the smell goes away, until spring. Then it returns. Like vengeance. You once dreamed of becoming a poet. But after enough mornings spent squatting in the cold, all your verses started with, "Oh, merciless hole." You stopped writing them down. No one wanted to read them anyway. There's a boy in the next village who swears he saw a tanuki fall into the pit. He says it climbed out, glared at him, and hasn't been seen since. The boy's been quiet ever since, too. And yet, every day, you go. Because you must. Because the alternative is unthinkable. Because the system works in its own horrifying, splinter-filled way. And somehow, despite it all, you survive. You do what peasants do best. Adapt, lower your standards, and pray for an early thaw. You wake up in the dark, again. It's the kind of dark that doesn't feel peaceful. Not like those poetic kinds, where you stretch gently and fall back into a soft cloud of dreams. No, this is the prickly kind. The restless, itchy, strangely moist kind. Your blanket is wrapped around your legs like a question you can't answer. Your mat feels damp. Your back feels bent. Your neck is stuck. You blink. You hear breathing. That's normal. The whole family's here. But there's something else. A whine. Faint, high-pitched. Mosquito. You freeze. You wait. It gets louder. Then silence. Then strike. You slap your cheek, miss. The sound returns. Louder, closer, more confident. You cover your head. Your blanket smells like old feet and smoke. But it's safer inside. You try to sleep. Your stomach has other ideas. It growls. Not politely. Not a gentle rumble. This is a protest. A full-throated demand for attention. You curl tighter. Maybe if you ignore it, it'll give up. It doesn't. It starts making promises. Memories of meals you never had. Fantasies of grilled fish, sticky rice, sweet bean cakes. You drool a little, then hate yourself. You sit up, carefully, slowly. Your brother stirs, mutters something about dumplings. Lies. The room is quiet, except for the wind. And the mosquito. And your stomach, now composing an opera in B minor. You look around. The hearth is dead. The embers have surrendered. The air is thick. And the smell. It's mold. From the ceiling. From the floor. From the walls. It rains sometimes, not outside, inside. Condensation gathers on the beams, drips on your nose, your toes, your pride. Your mother says mold keeps away bad spirits. You think it is the bad spirit? You stand up, barefoot, always. The floor is cold, slightly damp, textured with crumbs, grit, and mystery. You step carefully, past the mat, past the snoring shapes, past the chicken, into the corner, the food corner, or, more accurately, the where food used to be corner. You lift the lid of the storage box, empty. You open the hanging net. One piece of dried radish, grey, chewy, possibly cursed. You chew it anyway. It tastes like rope and vinegar. You pretend it's beef jerky. You fail. You sit by the cold hearth, nibbling the radish like a raccoon in a museum. You think about food, again. What it could be. What it never is. You remember the time you smelled mochi. Real mochi. Sticky, steamy. You were 6. You haven't smelled it since, but your brain replays the memory like it's trying to torture you. You sigh. You lick your fingers. They taste like ash and childhood disappointment. You hear movement. Your grandmother sits up, blinks at you, says nothing, just nods. She knows. She's done the same. She probably still does. The secret midnight shame of the always hungry. You nod back. Silent bond of the sleepless and slightly fermented. She lies back down, snores within seconds. You envy that. You stare into the hearth, into the cold ash. You imagine fire. You imagine heat. You imagine a roasted sweet potato, buried in coals, split open with steam curling into the night. You imagine biting into it, the skin crisp, the inside molten. You swallow. There's nothing, just radish and shame. You lie back down. You pull the blanket over your head. The mosquito has returned. You slap, miss. Slap again. Connect, small victory. Your stomach growls in approval. You close your eyes. You try to sleep. You count bowls of rice. You count dumplings. You count slices of grilled eel served with pickled ginger. You lose count. You sleep. Hungry. Always hungry, but slightly less alone in it. You wake up with the taste of rice in your mouth. Not real rice, dream rice. The kind that's soft, steaming, gently sticky. The kind that glistens under sunlight, rests in lacquer bowls, and comes with pickles that don't taste like foot water. You chew in your dream, slowly, blissfully. Then you bite down. Pain. Real pain. You open your eyes, your jaw throbs, your tongue explores the corner of your mouth and finds it again. That tooth, the one that hums, the one with a crater in it so deep it might qualify as a well. You sigh, carefully. There's no such thing as dentistry here. There's salt water and superstition. If your tooth hurts, chew the opposite side. If both sides hurt, chew slower. If that fails, stop chewing. And if you can't stop chewing, well, welcome to adulthood. You sit up. Your breath is stale. You haven't brushed anything in days. Not your hair, not your teeth, not your sense of self-worth. You pick up a twig. The tooth stick. It's old, frayed at one end, slightly bitter. You chew it gently. Move it back and forth. Spit into a corner. It doesn't help. You try not to cry. Crying wakes people up. And there's nothing worse than being seen mourning a molar. Breakfast is barley, again. You chew on the left side. Your right tooth pulses in protest. You slow down, grind carefully, swallow half-chewed grain. It scratches all the way down. Your mother notices. She says nothing. Just slides a small daikon toward you. Soft, pickled for weeks. You nod in silent gratitude. It's bland, but it doesn't fight back. You think briefly about boiling your rice ball until it dissolves. You don't. That would be wasteful. And weak. You go to the fields. The sun is low, the mist thick. You breathe through your mouth. That helps the smell. Hurts the tooth. You dig, you haul, you sweat. Every clench of your jaw is a gamble. Will it crack today? Will a piece fall out? Will your tongue taste iron? Not yet. You dig harder. Maybe the pain will bury itself. At midday, you unwrap your lunch slowly. It's soft today. Millet soaked longer. That helps. You chew slowly. Each bite negotiated with care. Each swallow a minor triumph. You avoid the plum in the center. Too sour, too risky. Your brother eats fast, loud, joyless. You envy his molars. You stare at the rice dream fading from memory. You wonder if pain makes it more precious. Maybe that's why the rich don't appreciate rice. Their teeth don't hurt when they eat it. Later that afternoon, you see an old man at the edge of the fields. He's missing half his teeth. The other half are brown, jagged, and defiant. He eats roasted chestnuts. You stare. He sees you. He grins. You wince. Your grandmother once told you she used to pull her own teeth with string tied to the door frame. You asked her what happened afterward. She said, "Then I could sleep again." You haven't slept properly in 3 days. You eye the door frame. Not yet. Dinner is miso again. Warm, thin, gentle on the gums. You sip carefully. Tonight, you skip the rice cake. It's too hard. You pretend you're full. You're not. But your mouth is too tired to lie anymore. You lie down slowly, head resting on your arm, mouth closed, jaw unclenched. You dream of tofu. Soft, silent, friendly. You dream of rice that melts. You dream of teeth that don't scream. You wake up with a jolt. The pain is still there. Of course it is. You whisper to yourself, maybe tomorrow it'll fall out. Maybe then you'll know peace. Maybe. You close your eyes and dream of chewing. Without consequence. You first hear them in the dark. Not the big sounds. Not thunder, not rain, not roosters with poor timing. These are small sounds, tiny scratches, soft feet, whiskers brushing dry rice straw. Rats. You don't sit up. You don't need to. They're not in the walls. They're not beneath the floorboards. They're inside. Again, the rat problem is not new. You live with gaps in your house, gaps in your walls, in your door, in your luck. The food store is a woven box tied shut with frayed rope. The rats figured out the knot weeks ago. Now, the battle is about minimizing damage. You don't ask how they get in. You know, the same way desperation does. Through whatever openings left. One night last month, a rat dragged off half a rice cake. Not the soft kind. The old kind. The kind you could use as roofing tile. You were impressed, then offended, then just hungry. Your mother sets traps, simple ones, a stick, a bowl, a tiny bait. Sometimes they work. Sometimes you just hear the bowl rattling in the night, followed by silence. And in the morning, nothing. You suspect the rats have learned. You suspect they're smarter than you. That thought keeps you up more than the scratching. Then the thieves come. Not rats, not animals. People. You don't see them. You hear them. Boots in the distance. A gate creaking. A cough that's not from your brother. Your village isn't rich, but it has food. Or at least the idea of food. Which to some is enough. Last week someone's barrel of pickles went missing. Gone. The whole thing. Wooden lid left sitting politely on the ground. Your neighbor cursed for hours. Then cried. Then blamed the local tanuki. No one believed him. Everyone checked their doors that night. Yours doesn't lock, but you leaned a hoe against it. It made you feel better. Symbolic security. The rats at least don't care about symbolism. Autumn is not harvest season. Not really. It's when the food you worked so hard to grow begins to vanish. Slowly. Quietly. Bite by bite. Some of it disappears into mouths. Some into sacks. Some into holes dug behind houses, just in case. You've seen your mother do it. You said nothing. Because you did it too. There's no shame in hoarding. Only in getting caught. You once thought about stealing. Just once. You saw an unattended basket, sweet potatoes. You stared at it for a long time, then walked away. Not out of virtue, but because the owner came back with a stick. You value your teeth, what's left of them. But others do steal, quietly, from neighbors, from storage sheds, from altars. Last night, someone took the incense from the temple. Why? Because incense is tradable. Because desperation doesn't care about sanctity. Because when your child is crying and the radish is gone, even a prayer stick looks like potential. Your brother asks if the rats can be eaten. You look at him. He's not joking. You don't say yes, but you also don't say no. The traps get better. Your uncle builds one with a spring mechanism. It snaps. It works. The rat is dead. You bury it. Mostly because your grandmother says bad luck comes from disrespect. Also because the smell was already winning. But then, one night, the noise stops. No scratching. No feet. No soft chewing. Nothing. For 3 nights. The 4th night, someone steals your last turnip. You realize the rats weren't gone. They just evolved. Your mother doesn't say anything. She just boils more water. Adds miso. Serves it thinner. Adds nothing else. You drink it. You pretend it's a choice. You dream of rice again. You dream of locking your door. You dream of biting into something and not having to share it with a shadow. You wake up cold, and the rat is back, sitting on the ledge, watching, judging, and you know, he's just waiting for you to fall asleep, so he can finish your dream. From the inside, the soup is almost nothing. You stare into the bowl. The steam rises, brave and confident, making promises the contents can't keep. There's water, mostly. Warm, vaguely cloudy, with a hint of salt if you squint with your tongue. Floating inside is something that was once a cabbage leaf. Maybe. It's translucent now, worn thin by boiling and time. You scoop it gently, it tears. You swallow anyway. It's hot, that helps, but not much. This is winter food, not the food you eat in winter. The food you eat before winter, when you're pretending it hasn't started yet. When you still think maybe there's enough turnip left in the ground, or enough miso in the jar, or enough rice scrapings at the bottom of the box. When the meals get thinner, when the bowls get cleaner, when silence at the table lasts a little longer. You reach for the stale ale. Not beer, not really. Just leftover grain water, fermented in a jar, forgotten behind the stove until someone remembered it might be good for the blood. It smells like vinegar and wet wood. You drink it slowly. It burns a little, then warms. You close your eyes. For a moment, the taste tricks you. You imagine yourself in an izakaya, seated on a tatami mat with grilled fish on a skewer and laughter that isn't forced. Then you open your eyes, back in the smoky hut, back in the cold, back in the reality where ale is a memory someone watered down and left on your doorstep. Your grandmother hiccups softly. She's had more than one sip. Her cheeks are pink. She starts humming a song from before you were born. Your brother tries not to laugh. You smile a little. It's rare and precious, even if it tastes like mold. You remember last winter. The soup back then was worse. Just hot water with rice husks. One night it was just water. No one said anything, but your mother cried after you fell asleep. You pretended not to hear. The wind outside howls. The walls creak. You pull your robe tighter, sip the ale again. It's sharper now. Or your tongue is just more honest. Your stomach shifts. Not in pain, just noticing. Not full, not angry, just awake. You'll take it. Your brother finishes his bowl and stares into it like he's reading the future. He asks if there's more. There isn't. He doesn't complain. He just licks the rim, carefully, then sets it down like it might break if he moves too fast. You once had soup with fish in it. A wedding, long ago. There were green onions, seaweed, real broth. You think about that every winter. You wonder if the bride is still alive. You wonder if she still makes soup like that. You hope so. Someone should. The ale is nearly gone. You pour the last bit into your grandmother's cup. She toasts no one, then drinks, then sighs, then falls asleep sitting up. You let her. It's warmer that way. You scrape your bowl with your finger. You lick your finger. You chew on the wood. You spit out a splinter. You call it a meal. You call it a memory. You call it enough. You lie down beside the hearth. The coals are dim. The blanket is thin. But you're warm from the inside. A little. The stale ale hums quietly in your belly. You close your eyes. You imagine tomorrow's soup will have flavor. Or at least thickness. Or at least more leaf. You dream of broth that sticks to your tongue. You dream of miso that doesn't apologize. You dream of a ladle that dips deep into a full pot. You wake before it ends. And the soup is gone. But the cold isn't. Of course it isn't. You wake up cold. Not chilly. Not uncomfortable. Not the kind of cold you can shake off by hugging your knees or pulling the blanket tighter. This is bone deep. This is ancestral. This cold comes from the floor, the walls, the sky, and somehow from inside you, too. You open your eyes and see no glow. The fire is dead. You lie still for a moment. Because movement costs heat. Because breathing too hard costs moisture. Because hope doesn't rise as fast as frost. The blanket covers only part of you. Your toes ache. Your fingers curl instinctively. You try to tuck yourself into yourself. It doesn't help. You sit up. The hearth is dark. No embers, no smoke, just ash. You can't remember when it last went out completely. But you know what that means. You're out of wood. You don't say anything. No one does. Your brother opens his eyes, looks at the hearth, looks away. Your mother's already up, wrapping cloth around her hands, layering her robe, looking everywhere but at you. She doesn't sigh. Even that would be wasteful. You shuffle outside. The wind slaps you immediately, sharp, mean, like it knows. You go to the woodpile. There's nothing there. Just snow. You dig. Maybe something's buried. A stick, a sliver, anything. You find a frozen reed. You break it. It crumbles in your hand. You laugh, once, softly, bitterly. Then you go back inside. Breakfast is not warm. It's not even food. It's what your mother calls holding water. A cup passed from hand to hand, shared like a secret. Heated once, now only lukewarm. You sip it, you pretend it helps. You pretend you can still feel your lips. Someone mentions burning straw. Someone else says no, it burns too fast. Someone mentions burning the old mat. Everyone looks at the mat, then away. The mat stays. For now. Your grandmother doesn't get up. She just pulls the blanket higher. You hope she's just sleeping. You don't ask. You don't want the answer. That afternoon, you collect twigs. Anything dry, anything brittle. You pull splinters from the edge of the gate, from the wall, from the tool handles. You burn a chopstick. You burn a spoon. You burn part of the broom. It smells like work. The fire comes back. Briefly, weakly. It shivers more than it glows. But you all sit near it anyway. Like it's enough. Because pretending helps. Until it doesn't. Dinner is cold rice mash. Grey, clumpy. You chew it slowly. Because chewing is something to do. Because warmth isn't an option. You close your eyes while eating. Try to remember soup. Try to remember what steam looked like. Try to remember a time when your breath didn't show in the air. You fail. That night, the wind screams. It moves through the cracks like a burglar. You hear it touch the walls, the roof, your spine. You bury your face in your arms. You don't sleep. Not really. Just drift. Float. Wait. In your dream, the fire comes back. It fills the room, fills your chest, fills your hands. You feel your toes again. You feel your grandmother's laughter. You see steam curling from miso soup. Then the wind blows through the dream, and the fire's gone. You wake. The hearth is cold. Your hands are numb. But you're still here, barely. You sit up, breathe, and say nothing, because the fire is dead. But you are not yet. Imagine this. You are a farmer in Kamakura-era Japan, perhaps around the 13th century. You wake up to the crackle of the hearth, not because it's cozy, but because the embers barely survived the night. The air is cold, your bedding is stiff, and the straw under your futon creaks when you move. It smells faintly of old ash, dry grass, and the acidic tang of vinegar-soaked rice. You don't bathe first thing. You don't stretch or sip tea. You check the fire. If it's gone out, you'll need to borrow a coal from your neighbor, if they're awake and if they're willing. Fire is life. Fire is food. Your first task every day is water. You walk with a sloshing pail down the dirt track to the nearby stream. The water is cold, clear, and alive with movement. In spring, you might see tiny fish darting in the current. In summer, it's a relief to your feet. But in winter, it bites. Back home, your family is stirring. Children whimper in their sleep from the cold. Your spouse unwraps the leftover rice from the night before, if there is any. In the absence of rice, you boil millet. It's coarse, dry, and vaguely nutty. It sticks to your teeth, but it fills the belly. For a little while. There are no spices. Salt is scarce and expensive. Soy sauce is a luxury. The only seasoning might be wild herbs picked during warmer months, dried and stored in paper pouches if you were lucky, or smart. Your teeth hurt. Many people's do. Stones sometimes make their way into the rice. You've cracked a molar before? You chewed on it until you swallowed the splinter. You work the fields. Rice in the lowlands, vegetables on the ridges. In good years, you might grow daikon, burdock root, leeks, and wild greens. You eat what you grow. You also eat what refuses to die. Fermented pickles, salted until your lips pucker, stored in clay jars that smell earthy and sharp. Midday is not a break. It's a pause. A moment to chew on a cold rice ball, perhaps dipped in miso paste or sprinkled with sesame if you're lucky. More often, it's just rice. Maybe a boiled leaf. Maybe nothing. And then, you work again, until the light fades. When the sun goes, so do your tools. There are no lanterns in the field, no snacks in your pocket. Only a growling stomach and a body heavy from lifting, planting, hauling, sweating. Back home, your evening meal is a repetition of breakfast, sometimes a little less, sometimes broth, hot water with fermented bean paste, maybe a chunk of radish floating in it. On rich nights, a little fish, dried or grilled. Bones and all. There is no concept of dinner party. You eat silently. You eat quickly. You don't waste a grain. Leftovers are a myth. Hunger is not. When you lay down to sleep, the fire has dimmed again. The futon is thin. The wind whistles through the cracks in the wood. You curl up, not from coziness but to conserve warmth. Your stomach rumbles. You dream of nothing. But tomorrow, the same rhythm continues. The rhythm of their lives, simple, cyclical, and full of struggle, was not a punishment. It was simply life. And now that you've tasted the routine of an ordinary day, let us now shift gently from the quiet shuffle of daily chores to the footsteps of a man who tried, quietly and persistently, to change the way Japan fed itself. Let's travel now from the steaming pot of millet back into the faded ink of old scrolls, where, tucked among bureaucratic reports and moral admonitions, we find the quiet footprints of Ando Shueki. Not a household name, not a warlord, not a poet, and certainly not someone with a statue in Tokyo. Yet in his small way, Shueki tried to do something radical for the starving belly of feudal Japan. He tried to think differently. Born in the early 1700s during the Edo period, Shueki was trained as a doctor. But like many men who spend their lives watching others suffer, he began to suspect that the real disease wasn't in the body, it was in the system. Imagine him hunched over paper in a candlelit room, the smell of ink thick around him, sleeves tugged back to avoid smudging as he wrote his treatise. Shizen Shin Edo, the true way of nature. His idea. That hunger wasn't inevitable, that the social structure of Japan itself had made it so. At the time, Japan was under the strict rule of the Tokugawa shogunate. The samurai class held prestige, the merchants accumulated wealth, and the peasants, who grew the rice that literally fed the empire, were kept firmly on the bottom rung. Shueki questioned this hierarchy. He believed that everyone should work the fields, that no class should live in idleness, and that the true way to live was in harmony with the soil. This may sound obvious now. Of course, labor should be valued. But in his time, it was nearly heresy. To suggest that samurai should pick up a hoe, that the emperor's advisors should stoop to plant turnips, it was social inversion on paper. He wasn't calling for revolt. No swords, no battles, no flames, just thought, ideas whispered onto parchment. Shuki's writing wasn't widely circulated in his lifetime. His students were few. His work was preserved more out of curiosity than acclaim. But in his words, we glimpse a rare thing in feudal Japan: compassion paired with critique. He didn't romanticize the peasant's life. He knew it was harsh, but he believed it shouldn't have to be. If the land produced food, why were people still starving? Why indeed? Even as rice taxes were hauled off to storehouses, even as feasts were held behind paper walls, millions of villagers scraped moss off rocks or boiled bark to make broth. And Shueki watched, and he wrote, and he hoped that someday someone would listen. Of course, his ideas never gained traction in his lifetime. Japan remained stratified. The hunger remained. But seeds were planted. Quiet ones. Not in fields, but in mines. Today you can still find his texts in university archives. Few read them. Fewer still remember his name. But that's the way it often is with those who tried to ease suffering through thought rather than force. Shuki's dream of an egalitarian countryside never came true, but his diagnosis of the problem remains hauntingly accurate. A society that eats unevenly will suffer unevenly. And it did. As we leave his flickering candle behind, let's turn now to the stranger side of food. Those rituals, remedies, and relics left behind in clay pots and paper scrolls, telling us not just what people ate, but what they believed food could be. Let's now drift away from the cold facts of hunger and into the stranger sense of history, where food wasn't just eaten, but fermented, buried, blessed, and feared. If you were to dig beneath an old farmhouse in the Japanese countryside, beneath the tatami mats, beneath the hard-packed earth, you might stumble upon a jar. Not a treasure, not coins, not tools. A jar of tsukemono, Japanese pickles. Or at least what's left of them. Still sealed, still sour. For centuries, fermentation was not just a technique. It was a survival tactic, a flavor amplifier, and sometimes a religious gesture. Because without pickling, there would be little left to eat when the frost claimed the fields. Picture it. A mother, kneeling on a woven mat, slices daikon into thin discs, salts them carefully, and presses them into a wooden tub with heavy stones. The tub smells of vinegar and spice, a sharpness that climbs up your nose and lingers behind your eyes. She tucks it into a corner of the house where sunlight doesn't touch it. Weeks pass. She checks. She stirs. She waits. And when food becomes scarce, truly scarce, she opens it. The smell is powerful, almost alive, like something crawling back from death. But it nourishes. It stretches the meal. It preserves memory as much as flavor. In feudal Japan, Many believed that food could carry spiritual properties, that certain fermented items, aged just right, could balance the body's energies or ward off illness. The line between nourishment and medicine was thin. Some even offered bits of fermented miso or sake leaves to the local shrines, as if to bribe the gods with the aroma of patience. Archaeologists have found curious jars near ancient village sites, clay vessels sealed with wax, filled with the remains of beans, roots, and fish left to rot in carefully measured ways. The intentionality of decay. A paradox, letting food go bad to make it last. There are myths, too. In the rainy valleys of Kyushu, stories tell of a pickle so pungent it could wake the dead, or at least drive off the spirits that made your children sick. Others believed that burying fermented vegetables near your home could protect the harvest, a sort of microbial charm, a faith in rot. Even today, in small towns scattered across Japan's interior, grandmothers still stir pickling pots that are generations old, ceramic passed down like heirlooms. The smell? A mix of sour plum, brine, and thyme. And speaking of plums, umeboshi, the legendary salted plum, so sour it could bend your eyebrows inward, used as a breakfast side, a travel ration, and a battlefield ration. Soldiers tucked them into their armor for strength. Mothers fed them to feverish children. Monks preserved them with reverence. The idea was always the same: to endure, to stretch summer into winter, to carry strength from one season into the next, to eat not just what was available, but what was aged with care, as if time itself could be a spice. And then there were the strange customs. In some villages, the first pickle of the season was never eaten. It was buried near the boundary of the rice field as an offering of gratitude and insurance. If the gods liked the brine, they'd spare your crops. If not, well, you had other jars. Fermentation, in its essence, is faith in transformation. That what smells strong today might save you tomorrow. That decay is not always decline. Sometimes it's strategy. As the scent of old vinegar fades behind us, let's now lift the curtain on the dining rooms of those who never needed to pickle their food, because it was always fresh, always flavored, always delivered. And their plates tell a story all their own. Now let us rise, gently and with dusty feet, from the thatched roof homes of villages and wander toward a world far removed. Past the rice fields and crooked paths, beyond the merchant stalls and clanging forges, until the thatch turns to tile, and the meals begin to shimmer with gold leaf and clean white rice. Welcome to the dining halls of the elite, where food was not just sustenance, but symbol. In feudal Japan, the contrast between classes was not merely stitched into clothing or etched onto swords. It was cooked and arranged artfully on lacquer trays. Let's begin with the samurai. Contrary to popular imagination, not all samurai lived lavishly. Many were poor in coin but rich in rice, paid in bundles rather than silver. Still, even a mid-ranking samurai's table would bear little resemblance to the farmer's. Imagine kneeling on woven mats as a tray is placed before you. It holds a ceramic bowl of polished white rice, a luxury most villagers saw only on New Year's Day. Alongside it, miso soup, perhaps seasoned with kelp or mushroom, and a dish of pickled cucumber cut with precision. And then, fish, often grilled, seasoned, flaking delicately with each touch of the chopsticks. Sea bream or mackerel, caught and transported quickly thanks to courier systems the poor could never afford. Maybe a sprinkle of citrus peel, maybe a dab of grated radish. And yes, they drank tea, not because they were thirsty, but because it refined the experience, hot, bitter, and ceremonial. Sipped slowly, bowed over, eyes lowered. In the castles of daimyo, the meals grew more elaborate. Courses arrived like clockwork. Soup, sashimi, grilled fish, vinegared vegetables, simmered root, steamed dumpling, followed by dessert. Yes, dessert. made from red bean paste, chestnuts, or mochi. Not a speck of ash in sight. No need to borrow coals, no worry about salt. And at the highest seat, beneath silk banners and golden crests, there was the emperor's table. Though shrouded in ceremony and often isolated from the day-to-day world, imperial meals were less about indulgence and more about ritual precision. A court meal in Kyoto might include 20 courses, many of them symbolic. A soup to cleanse, a dish to welcome, a course to honor the season, another to mirror the moon. Even the placement of the dishes reflected the universe's order. Nothing was accidental. Every bite meant something. But here's the twist. While peasants dreamed of warmth and fat, and samurai enjoyed clean rice and grilled fish, the emperor himself often ate blandly. Ceremonial meals were rarely flavored extravagantly. Salt, sugar, and strong seasonings were frowned upon for the imperial mouth. Why? Because purity mattered more than taste. Even in wealth, there were rules. Even surrounded by plenty, restraint was a virtue. The emperor might go years without tasting garlic. Not because he couldn't, but because he shouldn't. Still, the difference between classes remained vast. While a peasant chewed on dried burdock root and boiled water into soup, a daimyo's child spat out rice that wasn't fluffy enough. And yet, when drought struck or war came, even the elite had to compromise. Fish went sour, markets emptied, couriers stopped, and then even a samurai might find himself sipping thin broth and hoping it would be enough. Because no amount of rank, wealth, or armor could fully shield you from the realities of a country that grew just enough food. And sometimes not even that. In this way, food was the great reminder that everyone ate and everyone hungered, just not always equally. As our journey nears its midpoint and the rhythm of chopsticks fades into the silence of sleeping houses, let's rest a moment in the stillness of the night. What does it mean to sleep with a full belly? What does it mean to dream on an empty one? And what echoes of those old hunger pangs still reach us now? The sun has dipped beneath the mountains. The paddies are quiet. The heat of the day has slipped away, leaving only cool air and the soft clicking of crickets. You are back in the countryside now, curled beneath a thin blanket, listening. Outside, the wind moves lazily through bamboo leaves. There is no glass on the windows, just paper and wood. The sounds come through clearly. The soft shuffle of someone relieving themselves in the brush. The creak of rope on a water bucket left outside. The rustle of rats in the thatch. Inside the house, the fire has died. Only embers remain, pulsing faintly like distant stars. There isn't enough wood to keep it going all night. Wood is for cooking. Warmth is a luxury best saved for illness or childbirth. You lie on your side, knees curled, belly hollow. Dinner was a bowl of broth, a spoonful of miso in hot water, with a sliver of radish so thin you could see light through it. The baby cried from hunger. You tried to hush it with a lullaby, but lullabies don't fill stomachs. You dream strange dreams when you sleep hungry, of feasts that vanish as you reach for them, of rice that spills through your fingers like sand, of mochi so soft it melts, but only in dreams. The body adjusts to hunger. It conserves energy. It slows. You don't toss and turn. You drift, lightly like a leaf on a stream. The children sleep. One chews in their dreams. You know because you hear the tiny grinding of teeth. Your spouse mumbles, half-conscious, repeating the name of a long-dead sibling. Dreams bring back the dead when bellies are empty. You know your body is weakening. Your breath is shallow. You have learned to stretch time between meals. You chew more slowly, drink more water. You avoid strenuous movement. You whisper instead of speak. Yet the rhythm of your life continues. The roosters will crow before dawn, not out of pride, but out of habit. And you will rise, pull on the same patched kimono, feel the same chill in the same bones, and walk the same path to the stream. In winter, your water freezes. In summer, it breeds mosquitoes. Either way, you boil it, not for taste, but for safety. Tonight, your neighbor's house is dark. Too dark. No candle. No smoke. You suspect they have nothing to cook. Nothing to burn. You wonder how many days it's been since they last ate properly. But you don't ask. In the countryside, shame is quiet. Still, even among the hunger, there are small comforts. You have learned to enjoy the feel of rice husks beneath your feet. The gritty texture tells you where you are in the dark. You've memorized the sound of each floorboard. You know which ones squeak and which ones sigh. And when the wind comes from the east, it brings the smell of plum blossoms from a neighbor's orchard, a tree they've managed to keep for 10 years. You once tasted one of those plums. Sour, sharp, unforgettable, like a sudden memory. Tonight, you whisper a quiet thanks to the gods, not for abundance, but for enough. Enough to wake, enough to walk, enough to survive another day. And as your eyes grow heavy, and the moon crawls toward its highest point, you listen once more to the sound of crickets, singing hunger to sleep. Tomorrow, it will begin again, but for now, just listen. Let's now open a different kind of window into the past, not into a home, but into a mind. Preserved not in clay or stone, but in the delicate ink of a diary. The thoughts of a man who lived between two worlds. His name was Yamamoto Tsunetomo. He is best known for Hagakure, a spiritual guidebook for samurai, written not as doctrine, but as reflection. It whispers of honor, loyalty, and the philosophy of death, but buried within the lines, between meditations on Bushido and tales of fallen lords, are clues about something much more grounded, how he ate and what he valued at the table. Tsunetomo served as a retainer in the saga domain during a time of peace in the early Edo period. His lord had died, and Tsunetomo, forbidden from committing ritual death by new shogunate law, retired instead, quietly to a secluded life. There, he wrote, and among his writings we find scattered mentions of salt, a simple thing, crystalline, ordinary. But to him, and to many of his time, salt was not merely a seasoning. It was wealth, power, and preservation all at once. Imagine being paid in rice, yet still unable to afford enough salt to preserve the fish your wife bought at market. Imagine living miles from the coast, where only the rich or powerful could procure sea salt in abundance. Inland villages sometimes relied on rock salt, harvested from boiling, salty spring water in great vats, a laborious process that devoured wood and time. Tsunetomo recounts stories of travelers who carried salt as gifts more precious than coin, of vassals who measured their master's favor not by gold, but by access to preserved foods. One entry tells of a samurai who offered salted kelp to a traveling monk, and in doing so was believed to have improved his karma for the next life. Salt was cleansing, both physically and spiritually. Used in Shinto rituals, scattered across thresholds to ward off evil, placed in small dishes outside doorways after funerals. Yet it was food where salt made its most haunting appearance. In his writings, Tsunetomo praises restraint in eating, but he also hints at indulgences. A pickled plum placed on polished rice, dried fish grilled over coals, small meals elevated by salt. He notes with curiosity how even the humblest dish, when properly salted, became something worthy of the emperor's table, a rare democratization of flavor in a stratified society. But he also observed that salt's scarcity kept this luxury from ever being widespread. Some samurai, he wrote, ate blandly on purpose to cultivate austerity. Others, with more ambition than wisdom, hoarded salt and suffered for it, as mold and vermin claimed what they failed to share. And in all this we glimpse a paradox. Tsunetomo lived by the sword, served a noble house, and meditated on death. But his entries about salt and food are among his most human. Quiet moments, humble tastes. A man who had power, yet still measured comfort by the sharp tang of a salted plum. His writings tell us that even those bound by duty, discipline, and bushido were not untouched by the small daily hunger of life. Because in the end, even a warrior returns home. Even a warrior eats, even a warrior dreams softly of salt. As we close his journal and extinguish the lantern, let us step quietly from one mind into another. From the disciplined reflections of a samurai to the sacred chaos of a village festival, where food and myth swirl together in the flicker of firelight. Not all festivals in Japan were bright. Not all gods were generous. Some festivals were held not to celebrate abundance, but to survive the absence of it. Tonight, we light no lanterns. We beat no drums. Instead, we gather around a small shrine in the hills, where rice is too scarce to throw, and offerings are shaped from air. There are records, thin, scattered, fragmented, of a curious tradition in certain rural pockets of feudal Japan. Villages where famine had left the fields cracked and the bellies lean. Places where food was so rare, so memory-like, that even the rituals around it had to change. One such tradition was the so-called starving festival, whispered by elders, rarely recorded by officials. It was said to take place after the second failed harvest, never the first, for the first could still be blamed on bad luck. But after the second, when even the millet had thinned and the pickles were gone, the people turned to Hokora no Kami, a minor household deity, neither grand nor famous. Hokora no Kami was said to be the god of empty bowls, a spirit not of generosity, but of sympathy. It was believed he once lived as a man, a poor farmer who gave his last meal to a stranger and starved beneath a cedar tree. After death, the gods pitied him and raised him up, not to rule but to watch. During this festival, no food was prepared. Instead, villagers would gather after dusk, each carrying an empty bowl. They'd sit in silence on the ground, forming a circle around the shrine. And one by one, they would lift their bowls to the sky, as if asking for steam, for scent, for a memory of fullness. Children were told that if you held the bowl steady long enough, Hokora would place a single grain inside while you slept. That grain, hidden in your pillow, would keep hunger away for one more night. Of course, no grain ever appeared, but the children slept anyway. Archaeologists have uncovered shrines like these, tiny, weathered stone altars, no larger than a loaf of bread, nestled in forgotten forest paths. Around them, fragments of ceramic bowls, too fragile for daily use, too deliberately placed to be discarded. Some even buried upside down, a gesture that said, "Not today, but maybe tomorrow." Folklorists who trace these rituals find more than belief. They find resilience. In a culture that honored ceremony in every part of life, even hunger became sacred. Not romanticized, but ritualized. The pain acknowledged, the need formalized, the emptiness shared. And then, when rains returned and harvests improved, the festival would be shelved. Not erased, simply stored in memory, like a jar of miso sealed against the next storm. What does it mean to honor a God who never provides? Maybe it means acknowledging that not all prayers are answered with food. Some are answered with patience, with solidarity, with a ritual that makes suffering feel seen. As you walk away from the shrine tonight, your bowl still empty, you do not feel full, but you feel accompanied. And in times of famine, that might be enough. Let us now return to the world of power and privilege, where prayers were rarely offered for grain, but for glory, for lineage, for image. And in those upper rooms, another kind of hunger was quietly brewing. Now let us descend from the realm of gods and empty bowls and step into something stranger, a world where food is no longer a question of survival, but of appearance. You're standing in the bustling merchant district of Edo, sometime in the 18th century. The streets are clean, the canals orderly, and the air is filled with the faint scent of grilled eel and sweet soy. Here, in Japan's growing cities, merchants, once considered socially low, have begun to quietly eclipse the samurai in wealth. And with that wealth came food, or rather the illusion of it. Imagine stepping into the home of a wealthy shonen, one of Edo's merchant elite. His home is large but not ostentatious. Humility, after all, is expected. But once you're inside, a servant removes your sandals and you're guided to a dining parlor lacquered in black and gold where the real show begins. A tray is placed before you, not just one dish but a whole procession. At first glance you might think you've been served 20 separate courses, a rainbow of shapes and textures, jelly-like cubes, tiny skewers of fish, delicate rice cakes dyed with plum blossom. The table seems to overflow, but look closer. The portions are minuscule, one mouthful each, designed not to feed, but to impress. A slice of carrot carved into the shape of a chrysanthemum, a rice ball tinted with gold leaf, a jelly made from agar, molded into a crane mid-flight. You are not meant to feel full. You are meant to feel important. The illusion of abundance was everything. In a society where true gluttony was frowned upon, aesthetic richness became the substitute. And nowhere was this more apparent than in the elaborate art of kaiseki dining, a style that emerged from tea ceremonies but blossomed under merchant patronage. Kaiseki was a meal as performance. Seasonal ingredients, elegant balance, visual storytelling on a tray. It emphasized harmony, not satisfaction. A meal designed to speak to the heart, not the stomach. Meanwhile, back in the countryside, villagers chewed boiled burdock root and watered down their soup to make it last 2 days. The difference was stark, but the merchant class often masked it with ritual humility. A host might apologize. This is nothing special, just a little something. As though the dried sea cucumber on your plate hadn't been carried from Hokkaido at great expense. Flavor, too, was carefully curated. The wealthy had access to sugar, a rare and precious ingredient imported in small amounts from the Ryukyu Islands or Dutch traders in Nagasaki. Sweetness was not just a taste, it was a status symbol. A sweetened red bean paste could whisper, "I am connected, I am cultured, I can afford pleasure." And yet, for all their access, many merchants still feared stepping out of line. Sumptuary laws placed strict limits on what each class could consume and display. A merchant caught eating delicacies reserved for the upper classes could be fined, or worse, shamed. So they found workarounds. A poor man might eat millet and brag of its health benefits. A rich one might sprinkle crushed sardines over rice and call it peasant chic. The illusion could go both ways. Because food in the city was not just food. It was theater. It was diplomacy, it was disguise, and sometimes, behind the painted bowls and lacquered trays, the merchants themselves whispered of simpler meals they once had. A plain rice ball shared with their father, a miso soup that tasted of wood smoke and real hunger. For all their wealth, not all were content, because in chasing beauty they had forgotten flavor, and in chasing refinement they had blunted appetite. So let us leave their silent, stylized meals behind. Let us return, just for a while, to the open fields, where the food was rough, the bowls were chipped, but the flavor was earned. The sun rises heavy in midsummer. No soft glow, no gentle warmth. It climbs like a furnace lid, locking the air in place. You feel it before you open your eyes. The straw of your bedding is damp. The wood of the floor is hot to the touch. You're already sweating. It's a day of work, like every other. But this is the season when water disappears. You walk the path to the stream. The pail is light. Too light. You already know what you'll see. At the stream's edge, water trickles, but only barely. Mud edges in like a creeping disease. You scoop what you can. It's brownish and warm. You will boil it later, twice, maybe 3 times. It won't matter. You'll still taste the metallic hint of desperation. Back in the fields, the rice stalks look thirsty. Their green is faded. Their edges curl. The soil beneath your sandals cracks open like old pottery. Each step raises dust. Your breath tastes like it came from a clay oven. You have no hat, only a scarf to wrap around your head. The sun burns through it anyway. You bend to weed. Your hands sink into the hot earth. The weeds come up reluctantly, their roots gripping what little moisture remains. The heat presses down, not just from above, but from below, from the steaming ground, from your own sweat-soaked clothing. There is no break for water. There is no shade. You chew on a vine stalk someone said could soothe thirst. It doesn't. You just keep chewing. By noon, your vision blurs. The air itself shimmers. A neighbor collapses in the distance. You don't run to help. You can't. You nod toward them. They nod back. That's all either of you can manage. Lunch is a broth. Hot, even in summer, because it must be boiled. A single daikon leaf floats in the bowl. The broth smells of overcooked root and salt scraped from the bottom of a jar. You drink every drop. Then you drink the water left over from rinsing the bowls. It's not clean, but it's wet. Children dig shallow pits beneath the trees, hoping for cooler air. They lie in them like small animals. You did the same when you were their age. You remember. Later, someone unearths a clay jug of fermented barley tea, mugisha. It's weak and sour and has a bite like vinegar. But it is cold. Cold enough to close your eyes and imagine ice. You pass it around slowly. One sip each. By sunset, your body is brittle, like a tree branch that might snap if pushed too hard. You feel yourself walking through syrup, your limbs slow, your tongue thick. You make it home. You splash water on your face. The pail is almost empty. Tomorrow, you'll have to walk farther. You know this. You've known it for days. At dinner, you sip miso soup made with bean paste so thin, it's nearly transparent. But it is warm, and it is yours. Before bed, you sit outside. The sky is purple-black. The cicadas cry like they're on fire. Somewhere in the distance, a dog pants. Not barking, just panting. Even animals are too tired to complain. You look at the stars. You do not make a wish. You no longer waste energy on wishes. Instead, you count. How many days since it rained? How many pails of water left? How many mouthfuls of pickles still in the jar? You don't cry. Tears are water too. You lie down, your skin sticky, your mouth dry. You fall asleep not because you're tired, but because you must. And in your dreams, it rains, soft and slow, filling the bowls, the barrels, the stream beds, soaking into the fields until even the rice stalks sigh. And when you wake, the thirst begins again. The sun rises heavy in midsummer. No soft glow, no gentle warmth. It climbs like a furnace lid, locking the air in place. You feel it before you open your eyes. The straw of your bedding is damp. The wood of the floor is hot to the touch. You're already sweating. It's a day of work like every other, but this is the season when water disappears. You walk the path to the stream. The pail is light, too light. You already know what you'll see. At the stream's edge, water trickles, but only barely. Mud edges in like a creeping disease. You scoop what you can. It's brownish and warm. You will boil it later, twice, maybe 3 times. It won't matter. You'll still taste the metallic hint of desperation. Back in the fields, the rice stalks look thirsty. Their green is faded. Their edges curl. The soil beneath your sandals cracks open like old pottery. Each step raises dust. Your breath tastes like it came from a clay oven. You have no hat, only a scarf to wrap around your head. The sun burns through it anyway. You bend to weed. Your hands sink into the hot earth. The weeds come up reluctantly, their roots gripping what little moisture remains. The heat presses down, not just from above, but from below, from the steaming ground, from your own sweat-soaked clothing. There is no break for water. There is no shade. You chew on a vine stalk someone said could soothe thirst. It doesn't. You just keep chewing. By noon, your vision blurs. The air itself shimmers. A neighbor collapses in the distance. You don't run to help. You can't. You nod toward them. They nod back. That's all either of you can manage. Lunch is a broth, hot even in summer because it must be boiled. A single daikon leaf floats in the bowl. The broth smells of overcooked root and salt scraped from the bottom of a jar. You drink every drop. Then you drink the water left over from rinsing the bowls. It's not clean, but it's wet. Children dig shallow pits beneath the trees, hoping for cooler air. They lie in them like small animals. You did the same when you were their age. You remember. Later, someone unearths a clay jug of fermented barley tea. Mugika. It's weak and sour and has a bite like vinegar. But it is cold. Cold enough to close your eyes and imagine ice. You pass it around slowly. One sip each. By sunset, your body is brittle, like a tree branch that might snap if pushed too hard. You feel yourself walking through syrup, your limbs slow, your tongue thick. You make it home. You splash water on your face. The pail is almost empty. Tomorrow you'll have to walk farther. You know this. You've known it for days. At dinner, you sip miso soup made with bean paste so thin it's nearly transparent. But it is warm, and it is yours. Before bed, you sit outside. The sky is purple-black. The cicadas cry like they're on fire. Somewhere in the distance, a dog pants. Not barking, just panting. Even animals are too tired to complain. You look at the stars. You do not make a wish. You no longer waste energy on wishes. Instead, you count. How many days since it rained? How many pails of water left? How many mouthfuls of pickles still in the jar? You don't cry. Tears are water too. You lie down, your skin sticky, your mouth dry. You fall asleep not because you're tired, but because you must. And in your dreams, it rains. Soft and slow. Filling the bowls, the barrels, the stream beds. Soaking into the fields until even the rice stalks sigh. And when you wake, the thirst begins again. The sun rises heavy in midsummer. No soft glow, no gentle warmth. It climbs like a furnace lid, locking the air in place. You feel it before you open your eyes. The straw of your bedding is damp. The wood of the floor is hot to the touch. You're already sweating. It's a day of work, like every other. But this is the season when water disappears. You walk the path to the stream. The pail is light, too light. You already know what you'll see. At the stream's edge, water trickles, but only barely. Mud edges in like a creeping disease. You scoop what you can. It's brownish and warm. You will boil it later, twice, maybe 3 times. It won't matter. You'll still taste the metallic hint of desperation. Back in the fields, the rice stalks look thirsty. Their green is faded. Their edges curl. The soil beneath your sandals cracks open like old pottery. Each step raises dust. Your breath tastes like it came from a clay oven. You have no hat, only a scarf to wrap around your head. The sun burns through it anyway. You bend to weed. Your hands sink into the hot earth. The weeds come up reluctantly, their roots gripping what little moisture remains. The heat presses down, not just from above, but from below, from the steaming ground, from your own sweat-soaked clothing. There is no break for water. There is no shade. You chew on a vine stalk, someone said, could soothe thirst. It doesn't. You just keep chewing. By noon, your vision blurs. The air itself shimmers. A neighbor collapses in the distance. You don't run to help. You can't. You nod toward them. They nod back. That's all either of you can manage. Lunch is a broth, hot even in summer because it must be boiled. A single daikon leaf floats in the bowl. The broth smells of overcooked root and salt scraped from the bottom of a jar. You drink every drop. Then you drink the water left over from rinsing the bowls. It's not clean, but it's wet. Children dig shallow pits beneath the trees, hoping for cooler air. They lie in them like small animals. You did the same when you were their age. You remember. Later, someone unearths a clay jug of fermented barley tea, mugika. It's weak and sour and has a bite like vinegar. But it is cold. Cold enough to close your eyes and imagine ice. You pass it around slowly. 1 sip each. By sunset, your body is brittle, like a tree branch that might snap if pushed too hard. You feel yourself walking through syrup, your limbs slow, your tongue thick. You make it home. You splash water on your face. The pail is almost empty. Tomorrow, you'll have to walk farther. You know this. You've known it for days. At dinner, you sip miso soup made with bean paste so thin it's nearly transparent. But it is warm, and it is yours. Before bed, you sit outside. The sky is purple-black. The cicadas cry like they're on fire. Somewhere in the distance, a dog pants. Not barking, just panting. Even animals are too tired to complain. You look at the stars. You do not make a wish. You no longer waste energy on wishes. Instead, you count. How many days since it rained? How many pails of water left? How many mouthfuls of pickles still in the jar? You don't cry. Tears are water too. You lie down, your skin sticky, your mouth dry. You fall asleep not because you're tired, but because you must. And in your dreams it rains, soft and slow, filling the bowls, the barrels, the stream beds, soaking into the fields until even the rice stalks sigh. And when you wake, the thirst begins again. Not all heroes wear armor. Some wear straw sandals, carry ledgers made of thin bamboo, and count, quietly, the rice that others will eat. Tonight, we turn our attention to a man with no statue, no family crest, and no poems in his name. Just ink, judgment, and the terrible burden of fairness. He was a village headman, or nanushi, a role both respected and resented in feudal Japan. Not a samurai, but a servant to them. Not a farmer, but a voice for them. He answered to the domain's officials, collected taxes, resolved disputes, and, most importantly, managed hunger. Imagine him in the heat of late summer. The storehouse is half full. The harvest is still weeks away. The mouths are many. The rain has not come. He sits cross-legged in the storehouse, surrounded by stacked bundles of rice wrapped in straw. He unseals one. The grain smells clean, but faintly damp. He presses a few kernels between his fingers. Too soft. It won't keep another month. He reaches for his tally sticks, each notched with a family's name. Some have more mouths to feed. Some have sick elders. Some have helped dig the communal well. He weighs them all, not just in numbers, but in stories. To give too much is to risk everyone's hunger. To give too little is to risk riot. He announces the ration cuts, quietly, without shame, but without apology. Families will now receive 3 bowls fewer per week. One grandmother volunteers to take less. A young father protests. A boy with fever gets an extra portion, quietly approved. And then he does something harder. He takes the same ration for himself. You see, a good headman didn't eat better than the others, not if he wanted to keep their trust. And so he too boiled old millet into bitter porridge. He too scraped the burnt rice from the pot and called it flavor. Some nights he would walk the fields alone, checking the growth. He knew every slope, every shade of green, every whisper of the stalks. He knew where the mold liked to creep in. He knew how many buckets of water remained in the communal barrel. And when the rain finally came, and the harvest was better than feared, he stored the surplus, not for a feast, but for the next bad year. His records were meticulous, not to impress his lords, but to remember. Which family lost a son to illness? Which field flooded? Which roof caved in and needed repairs? He didn't write poetry, but he recorded human lives. Later in life, his body bent from years of labor and worry. He passed his ledgers on to a younger man. They were bound in cracked leather. The ink faded, the corners curled. But they told the story of how a village survived. No swords, no glory, just math, mercy, and millet. We rarely remember men like him. But in quiet times of drought, it was he who decided whether a child went to bed hungry or simply not full. As we step away from his ledger and out into the crisp air of early fall, let's turn now toward the customs of a season that began in gratitude, but often ended in anxiety. Autumn in feudal Japan was a season of tension. To an outsider, it might seem beautiful. Fields golden with grain, leaves drifting like embers from the trees, the first cool evenings settling over the land like a silk blanket. But to those who lived by the harvest, autumn was not a reward. It was a test, because autumn carried a ghost. Not one you could see, not one that rattled windows or moaned in the rafters. No, this ghost was quieter and older. It lived in cellars and storage jars. It whispered from empty rice sacks. It followed you into winter. It was called Akijigoku, autumn hell, a phrase passed down in village talk, never written in law or prayer. It referred to the time after the harvest, but before the hunger ended. When the rice had been collected, yes, but also taxed, stored, and measured out. When granaries looked full but not yours. You see, the domain lords took their share first. The nengu, the annual rice tax, was collected often before a family had even filled its own barrel. What was left was divided by need and by luck. So autumn, with its false promise of plenty, often tightened rather than loosened. Archaeologists studying rural settlements have noted a strange pattern in refuse pits from the late harvest months. In many, there's a sudden spike in discarded chestnut shells, wild root fibers, and dried seaweed. Less rice, less fish, more foraging remains. It paints a picture of abundance declining in real time, from feast to fallback, from meal to method of survival. Folklore, too, absorbed this seasonal anxiety. In some villages, children were warned to avoid the fields at dusk, lest they be taken by the rice thief spirit, a hungry ghost with a woven basket on its back and a hole in its stomach. No matter how much it ate, it could never feel full. It wandered the post-harvest landscape, jealous of the living. A cautionary tale, but also a metaphor. That anxiety can linger even when the fields are full, that the memory of hunger is harder to erase than its cause. You can see it even now in rural autumn festivals. The pounding of mochi, the offerings of sweet rice cakes, the small fires lit at crossroads to ward off spirits. These were not just celebrations, they were wardings, insurance against the long, cold months to come. Because if you asked a villager whether they felt rich in autumn, they'd say, "Ask me in spring when we see what's left." And so the food was dried, the roots were buried, the pickles were sealed, the miso barrels topped with heavy stones. Everything was preserved, even fear. As the air cools and the moon waxes full, let us now rise from the cellars and root jars of the peasantry and climb back into the stone corridors of privilege, where weddings were held not in the name of survival, but of status. There, food meant celebration. There, autumn was not feared, it was feasted. Weddings in feudal Japan were not simply unions of love. They were contracts, spectacles, and above all, hierarchies set to music. Tonight, we walk into the carefully swept courtyard of a wealthy family's estate. Lanterns swing gently in the autumn air. White banners ripple from the eaves. Musicians tune their shamisen. A child releases a paper crane into the dusk. Somewhere, a girl, perhaps 15, waits quietly, her face powdered, her stomach hollow with nerves. It is her wedding day. She does not eat, but the guests will feast. The wedding banquet, Kekkon Noen, was the center of the event. Food as performance. Food as diplomacy. It told every guest exactly how valuable they were. The closer you sat to the couple, the more courses you received. The farther back, dishes grew simpler, fewer garnishes, thinner cuts of fish. At the head table, sea bream, symbolic of fortune. Sake poured 3 times in 3 sips from lacquered cups. Pickled chrysanthemum for purity. Red and white rice, colored for celebration. Everything carried meaning, and meaning was for the privileged. What did they actually eat? The elite dined on things most villagers couldn't name. Konbu rolls with eel, arrowroot jelly, lotus root carved into flowers, and tiny dishes of egg custard with ginkgo nuts. A soup might contain shrimp caught that morning, paired with mushrooms picked from mountain trails patrolled by hired gatherers. But the food wasn't meant to satisfy. It was meant to impress. Each dish arrived in its own tray, lacquered and pristine, with a folded paper charm tucked neatly beside the bowl. And behind the screen doors, out of sight, stood the people who made it all happen. Kitchen hands worked barefoot on stone floors, their sleeves dark with soy and ash. Young boys pumped bellows for the fire. Elderly women folded rice into shape. A single dropped dumpling could mean a beating. One cook was responsible only for garnishes, another just for fish slicing. No one talked loudly, no one tasted anything. They would eat later, if anything remained. And for those outside the walls, villagers, tenant farmers, distant cousins, the wedding was a rumor. A flash of silk passing in a palanquin, a scrap of red paper drifting in the wind. Sometimes, if the family was generous, they sent leftover mochi to the shrine as an offering. If a child happened to be there, they might get one. But more often than not, the feast was for the few. It was said that at some weddings, food was buried after the banquet, rather than handed to servants or the poor. To eat leftovers was to insult the gods of union. Waste, in these moments, was a signal of wealth. And yet, even among the elite, feasting had its rules. Sumptuary laws restricted excessive luxury. You could not serve Chinese duck unless you had status. Gold leaf was frowned upon in certain domains. A marriage was political, and the food had to walk the line between opulence and obedience. Sometimes the bride herself never touched the meal. She would sit, smile, bow, and excuse herself. Her hands remained folded in her lap, while the guests murmured over sea cucumber and rare mountain yam. Her hunger, if she felt it, was not part of the ceremony. In this way, weddings became not just rituals of love or lineage, but of access. To eat well, publicly, was to be seen as worthy. And to be seen eating nothing, that too was a kind of power. Let us now leave the lanterns behind. Let the music fade. Let the incense curl into the rafters and disappear. Because just beyond the walls of celebration, rats begin to stir, and those who are not invited begin to worry. What will they eat when the snow comes? The banquet is over. The music has quieted. The guests have returned to their tatami and their dreams of silk and sake. But elsewhere, beyond the edges of lantern light, the hunger has returned. It always does. The air is cooler now. Late autumn curls its fingers around the roof beams. The rice stalks have been cut. The paddies are quiet. The wind whistles through empty fields like a sigh too long held. You wake in the night to the sound of scratching. Not footsteps, not voices, just that slow, persistent sound. Claws on wood, something rustling behind the granary wall. You light a stub of candle. It flares, dim and yellow. You move quietly, not out of fear, but out of familiarity. You know what's waiting. Rats. You see one, then two, then more. A small family, perhaps, or just wanderers drawn by instinct. Their eyes glint, their tails drag. They vanish behind a barrel, leaving a trail of spilled grain behind. You do not shout, you do not run. You kneel, you gather the spilled rice back into your hand. Every grain counts. In feudal Japan, rats were more than pests. They were competition. And they were clever. They chewed through straw, slipped between rafters, nested in shoes, stole rice from beneath your very pillow. And in years when the harvest was thin, they were fed better than you. Some families hung their rice from beams in cloth sacks tied tight, rubbed with ash or mustard to deter nibbling. Others built traps, tiny boxes of wood and string. Still others left out rice laced with bitter herbs, hoping it would sicken the thieves. But most of all, people learned to listen to the sounds of hunger in the dark. Not their own, but that of tiny mouths with tiny teeth. You see, when rats returned in number, it meant the lean months had begun. You check your stores the next morning. The pickles are half gone. The miso pot smells faintly sour. The dried radish has gone soft around the edges. The children ask if there's fish. You shake your head. They don't cry. They know better. You portion the rice. You boil it longer with more water. You add twigs for fiber. They soften, barely. You chew them anyway, and then you begin to stretch. Every day, a little less food. A little more space between meals. You chew slower. You drink more tea. You lie down earlier to forget the ache in your belly. There's talk in the village of theft, of missing bundles, of rice barrels opened in the night. But no one accuses directly. Hunger turns neighbors into shadows. The headman tightens the rations. A family leaves quietly for a relative's home. A child falls ill and doesn't recover. You say nothing. Instead, you build a better lid for your grain jar. You sleep with your back against the wall. And at night, you listen again for rats, because they are the first warning. The scratching in the dark. The whisper that winter has come early, and it has brought its appetite with it. Let us now follow that whisper into the colder months, when even the most creative households begin to run out of tricks, and the soup becomes thinner than memory itself. As the cold deepens and the meals dwindle, we turn now to a figure cloaked not in silk nor in armor, but in silence. He walks barefoot through the snow, his robes damp at the hem, his bowl empty and held in both hands. He is a Zen monk, and he has not eaten solid food in 7 days. He is not starving. He is training. His name has been lost to most records, though some temple registries in the northern provinces list a Jokan, a quiet man of the Rinzai tradition, who, during the early 1600s, practiced the way of emptiness, and in doing so, taught entire villages how to live. On almost nothing. He believed hunger was not an enemy, but a teacher. That each pang of the belly was a bell, reminding the soul of impermanence. And so, when famine came, as it often did, Jokan did not flee. He stayed. He walked from hamlet to hamlet, not with rice to give, but with rituals. Methods of stretching food, of tricking the body into contentment, of teaching the villagers how to breathe through the ache. He taught them mud miso, a fermented paste made from wild leaves, bark shavings, and ground roots, buried and aged with salt and thyme until it faintly resembled soybean mash. He showed them how to boil tree lichen, soak it for 3 days, rinse, and cook it again with stones to soften the texture. He showed them how to drink air, not literally, of course, but through zazen, seated meditation, he trained bodies to slow, to quiet the stomach by steadying the breath. He called it shokuyo no fushin, the non-meal of acceptance. Some thought him mad. Others swore they survived the winter because of him. He kept no possessions, he took no students, but in temple kitchens across the region, you can still find 1-page scrolls, copied by hand, describing his rituals. Not recipes, instructions for restraint. One scroll, now kept behind glass in a rural temple, reads, "Boil the bark until it weeps. Do not salt on the first day. Let bitterness remain to remind the tongue of time." Another, "If the body cries, sit. If the mind weeps, sweep. If the belly burns, bow." He was not trying to romanticize hunger. He had felt its teeth. He had watched children fold from it. But he believed that in the absence of food, discipline became nourishment. Some say he died under a pine tree, in full meditation, during the 2nd month of winter. Others claim he walked into the mountains and never came back. But his teachings linger, in handwritten scrolls, in whispered prayers before a meal, in the way some elders still eat in silence, even when the bowl is full. Because sometimes the lesson of hunger is not what you eat, but how you endure. Let us now step gently into the final hush of winter. The snow has thickened, the fires have dimmed, and the pots have boiled down to their last. The night is long, but in the stillness something soft begins to stir. Winter in the countryside was not measured in days, but in fires left. You didn't count weeks. You counted bundles of firewood. You counted scoops of rice. You counted how many nights the embers in your hearth would last if no one stirred them. And when the fire finally died, truly and completely, when the ashes cooled to silence, that was how you knew the year was ending. But not everyone felt that cold. Up in the manor houses, past the winding mountain paths and frost-bitten fields, the winters looked different. Warm silk robes, servants tending to hearths, soup pots bubbling constantly, not because they had to, but because they could. In elite households, winter meant seasonal delicacies, mochi pounded fresh and still steaming, yuzu broth for flavor and fragrance, dried persimmons strung like garlands, even small amounts of white sugar, a jewel of a substance, imported and revered, dusted lightly onto sweets meant to remind guests of spring. They burned wood not for cooking, but for comfort. There was always more, always another stack hidden behind a screen, seasoned just right, cut to the perfect length. And yet, even in those homes, rituals of winter scarcity were performed. Not real ones, symbolic ones. A ceremony where the family would go without for a single meal. A show of humility. The head of the house would stir a pot of simple soup, daikon and broth, and declare, "Let us remember those who hunger." But once the guests left, the next course came quietly from the kitchen. Grilled sea bream, sake-warmed rice, egg custard with mountain yam. The fast was already forgotten. Down below, in the villages tucked into hills and valleys, the final fire burned low. You remember it. The kindling was soft. It hissed faintly, reluctant to catch. You fed it a pinch of dry bark, a twist of rice straw. Your child watched with wide eyes. They had never seen a fire die before. When it finally did, you did not speak. You wrapped the pot in cloth. You buried the last coals beneath ash, hoping they might sleep and not die. That night, your breath fogged in your sleep. You curled tighter. Your stomach quieted, not from satisfaction, but from exhaustion. And still you listened, not for rats this time, or wind or creaking beams, but for something softer, a change. Because in the quiet that follows the coldest night, something always shifts. A bird calls too early. A patch of snow melts into the dirt. A child wakes up hungry, but not crying. And then, on some morning you didn't mark on any calendar, you smell it. A shoot of wild garlic pushing through thawed earth, bitter, sharp, alive. The new year has begun. And now, as we come to the end of our long journey through smoke-filled kitchens and silent cellars, let the rhythm of old lives settle gently into the quiet of your room. Let the clatter of empty bowls fade behind you. Let the whispers of cold winters and pickled dreams dissolve like steam above hot rice. You have walked far tonight, not just through fields and forests, but through the deeper folds of memory, through want, through ritual, through the aching, strange poetry of survival, and now you lie still, full not of food, but of stories, heavy not with hunger, but with understanding. Think of that one grain of rice dropped in the dirt, brushed up and saved, that sour plum packed for a journey, that fire tended by a mother's cracked hands. They are still burning, somewhere in time. Out there in the dark, the monks still sit. The storehouses still creak. The rats still whisper behind walls. And the earth, always the earth, continues to grow food and to take it back. And yet, you have warmth, you have water, you have rest. Let that be enough. Let your breath come softer now, each one a quiet offering. Let your mind drift like smoke curling up from a winter hearth. Let your eyes grow heavier, not with sorrow, but with the sweet, slow weight of sleep. Because no matter the season, no matter the story, the fire you carry within you is still glowing, softly, silently. Still there. Some nights, even after the bowls have been washed and the fire banked in ash, the body remembers hunger. It is not a scream, not a cry, it is a slow echo. Tonight the house is still. The wind has softened. The children do not stir. But your stomach murmurs, not loudly, not in pain, just present. You've eaten what was left. A crust of barley, a sip of tea warmed over weak coals. Enough to quiet the edges, but not to fill the center. And so you dream. You dream not of feasts. Your mind no longer bothers with such extravagance. You dream of simplicity, a bowl of white rice, steam rising like a memory, a slice of pickled plum curled at the center, a bit of grilled fish flaking apart with no effort. The way it smells, the way it waits. You dream of hot soup, miso, dark and deep, with mushrooms gathered in the fall. You see your mother's hands wrapping cloth around the pot. Her fingers were always rough. She never minded. In the dream, you sit outside. The ground is warm, the fields are full. There is laughter, not loud, but steady, familiar. You are not alone. But even in the dream, you know it's not real. You feel your fingers curling beneath the blanket. You feel the chill pressing along the window frames. You feel the ache in your knees, the hollowness in your chest. Still, the dream continues. And when the rice is gone, and the soup has cooled, and the shadows grow longer on the tatami, you bow your head. You are grateful for even the illusion of fullness. You wake slowly, not suddenly, like surfacing from a deep river. You do not move. You listen to the silence. You feel the weight of sleep still wrapped around your shoulders. And as you open your eyes, there is nothing but shadow. But the hunger has passed. Not because you are full, because you've made peace with being empty. The fire is gone. The pot is dry. The last pickle was eaten 2 days ago. But today, something has changed. At first it was the smell. You noticed it just before dawn. Soft, earthy, wet. Not strong, not overwhelming. Just the quiet scent of soil shifting, of something long frozen loosening its grip. Then came the sound. Faint at first, like fingers tapping on thatch, then firmer, fuller, a rhythm against the roof that did not stop. Rain. Not snow, not frost, not mist. Rain. Real rain. You rise without a word. The others are still sleeping. You step into your sandals, still stiff with cold, and step outside. The sky is the color of iron. The rain falls straight, with purpose. It patters against the clay jars. It soaks the ash piles. It gathers in the cracked stone of the pathway and begins to fill them. You lift your face. It feels like a blessing. The roof leaks. The earth turns to mud. The barrels must be moved. The dry straw will spoil if left uncovered. But you smile anyway, because this is the first rain of spring. Later that day, you will notice the garlic shoots rising, the first weeds greening between the field stones. You will find that the pickling jars have held firm through the cold, that the miso has deepened, not spoiled. You will boil broth again, real broth, with greens pulled fresh from soft dirt, and your body will remember, slowly, with caution. The fire will be lit with less fear. The children will laugh more freely. The bowls will not be full, but they will not be empty. And as you lie down that night, the rain still falling gently on the roof, you will whisper one word. Enough! And this time, it will be true.